cloud now. Cool.
Thank you, everyone. It is 6:01 p.m. on June 10, 2024. I am calling to order the June meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board. Veronica-san, are you going to be our technical host this evening?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Can you walk us through the rules again? Thank you.
Can do. Let me know if everyone can see the screen. Perfect. All right, we're pleased to have you join us to strike a balance between meaningful, transparent engagement and online security. The following rules will be applied. This meeting has been called upon to conduct the business of the City of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meeting are prohibited. The time for speaking is limited to 3 minutes. No person shall speak except when recognized by myself, and no person shall speak for longer than the time allotted. Each person shall register to speak at the meeting using the person's real name. Any person believed to be using a name other than the one they are commonly known by will not be permitted to speak. Please use the raise hand function to be recognized for public comment. If you're on your phone, you will need to press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. No video will be permitted except for city officials, employees, and invited speakers and presenters. All others will participate by voice only. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates any rules. The Q&A function is enabled and will be used for individuals to communicate with myself, the technical host. It should be used for technical and online platform related questions only. If an attendee attempts to use Q&A for any other reason, the city reserves the right to disable the individual's access to the chat. Only the host and individuals designated by myself will be permitted to share their screens during the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So typically we would move to an approval of the minutes, but as has become our recent custom in recent years, we wanted to sort of halt the regular business of the meeting to acknowledge that there has been another traffic-related fatality in the city of Boulder. This time it was a child in a parking lot, I understand, being run over by a large truck. The driver of a large truck, excuse me. We have to acknowledge that what we're striving for is a city where no traffic fatalities happen. We obviously haven't reached that yet. And it is striking that we have a variety of different modalities through which people are dying on our roadways and in our public areas. Of course, this was probably a private parking lot, but nevertheless, a motor vehicle death in our town and in our community. And I think it is worthy of noting and reminding us of our top priority, which is that people should be able to get around safely and without killing anybody else. Does anyone else have anything to add at this moment? Well, on that grim beginning, we can move to agenda item 4. Excuse me. The approval of the minutes from our most recent meetings. We had 2 in May. We had the regular May tab meeting and our retreat on May 20th. Do any tab members have any? Let's start just with the regular meeting on May 13. Any adjustments, corrections to the minutes of that meeting? Seeing none. I think now I'll ask if anyone has any adjustments, corrections to the retreat minutes. I confess I haven't reviewed those. But they were sent out, is that right? Great. I've had my chance. Does anyone else have amendments or corrections? Okay, we will later on, I think, revisit and debrief about the tab retreat. But for now, I will happily entertain a motion to approve the tab minutes from the May 13th and May 20th meetings.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you,
for both
Darcy.
meetings.
Thank you. All seconded.
It was not your
Everyone else jumping
masterpiece,
in.
so
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes? Just raise your hand. I can count noses. You can say aye. Jen, I think you've frozen. Oh, no.
hmm.
The minutes are approved. I'm not sure if it's a vote of four or five, but the minutes are approved. There you go. Hi, Jen. Now you're unfrozen. Do you vote to approve the minutes as well? You're muted, hun.
Sorry, my internet sucks.
Oh no, that's
So
too bad.
I know. I mean, I'm trying to keep the camera on, but if it's real bad, I'll just have to turn off the camera.
Okay. All right. Do you approve the minutes?
I approve
Thank you. All right, unanimous. Thanks very much.
them.
Okay, we will move on now to invite public comment. I'm going to let Veronica take over again to handle this. I'm not sure I see any members of the public who wish to speak, but this would be the time to raise your hand.
Let's see. I do see one. Oh, it's going back and forth. Let's see. Lynn Siegel, I'm gonna ask if you can
you are.
unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
I just wanted to know the circumstances of that traffic death. And could I see the board, please? I'm just seeing my name on the screen.
You might have to toggle
There,
on
now I
your
see
Zoom.
you.
Okay. There's different views on Zoom, so you might be able to see just active speaker versus the whole panel. I think that's something you'll have to do on your end.
Oh, I'm just looking at my name now.
So is that all you need to know, that is the details of the crash?
Yeah, and I wanted to make my statement. I
Okay.
wanted to know, I mean, tomorrow when I go out, you know, and get myself killed, I'm not going to learn anything because you haven't said anything. What do I need to watch out for? Most of it is probably like I'll be standing on my bike, like right next to a Mondo truck that cannot physically see me. You know, I mean, they're just these big monster vehicles all over the place. And, you know, the problem for the city is that there are too many people here and people drive cars. I don't care. You know, you're going to hear next week, 2206 Pearl. It's going to be argued, oh, the people aren't going to drive cars. Yes, they are. They're going to take Uber to the storage lockers. Okay? Growth is the problem. Growth is the problem. Developer subsidies is the problem. It's your problem. It's Tab's problem. You want these deaths to continue? Go right ahead the way you are, because your mission has to really be with the other boards. You're just the one that gets used to solve the impossible problems they create. That's a big problem for you. If I were you, I'd say, I'm not going to do it. Just saying. You're not the fall board, but you are to the others that are making your lives miserable. And sure, there's going to be people complaining about Iris and about Folsom and about everything because it's an impossible situation. And it needs to be stopped. This growth needs to be stopped. And you know what? We've got it sweet compared to Gaza. 274 killed yesterday for 4 hostages, and 3 hostages, Israeli hostages, were killed in the process. That means 1.
Thank you,
That's
Lynn.
net 1 hostage.
Always food for thought. Thank you. Anyone else, Veronica?
It looks like we have Howard. Howard, if you can confirm you're able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. All right. So I'm calling about unmitigated traffic flow through our neighborhood in Majestic Heights. I've sent you guys some emails. I don't know if you get them. They seem to get rejected. I've talked to the city council. Back in 2020, I requested a third speed bump for South 43rd Street. I went through 3 directors in a matter of 3 years. Okay, so everybody's basically put their, nothing's happened. I collected signatures like I was supposed to. Nothing's happened. So what we have is we now have a high-speed thoroughfare through our neighborhood. People cutting through the Majestic Heights streets to avoid Table Mesa and Broadway intersection. These commuters do not care. They come flying through. We have 20-mile-an-hour speed bumps, which I think the speed should be changed to 15. So you can hear the suspension system. I wish they would brake flying over the speed bumps. They're clearly going faster than the 20-mile-an-hour. So what's going to happen is someone's going to get hit. Someone's going to hit a car. They do this when there's snow on the street. I mean, if the city of Boulder isn't going to do anything about it, then they should at least plow it. I've counted 30 to 40 cars an hour during rush hours, which is 7 to 9 and 3 to 5. It's relentless. So I believe that Google Maps, Apple, and those others are directing people up our street. 43rd is conveniently between all the other streets from 41st through 46th. Some streets don't even have speed bumps. So this is a severe situation. And I have gotten nowhere. I've sent letters to city council. I've dealt with the traffic, people. I have names of people I've dealt with. Also, it's just out of control. So if the city doesn't do anything, I'm buying some huge orange traffic diversions and fill them with water and see if those idiots hit them. So there's no more traffic mitigation program that the city of Boulder has. In 2022, the city council, for I do not know what their reason is, abolished it. So meanwhile, you have Longmont, Louisville, Erie, they all have traffic mitigation programs. There are none for the neighborhoods. So basically the city is failing to protect their citizens. I'll be glad to have the city traffic come and put one of those little black lines and see how much traffic. We're getting excessive amounts of traffic, and they don't give a rat's blank about our neighborhood, destroying our quality.
Thank you, Howard. That's your time. I understand your ire. I do recognize your name. Thank you for reaching out. I will respond to you by email offline out of this meeting.
It does not look like there's anyone else new with their hands raised.
Okay. Well, that being said, let us move on then to agenda item 6 about the CIP program.
Yeah, thanks. We're going to have Garrett and his team presenting on the CIP tonight, the draft CIP, and looking for your feedback on that. So I'll hand it over to Garrett.
Good evening, TAB. My name is Garrett Slater. I'm the Capital Projects Manager for the Transportation and Mobility Department. And I'm joined by James Smith, our Pavement Program Manager, and Lindsay Mers, a Civil Engineering Manager, and our Capital Projects team this evening. And so, as we mentioned at last month's meeting, we are here to present information on a series of 2 of 3, where last month we provided an overview of the already approved 2019 to 2024 capital improvement program. This evening, the purpose is to provide an overview of the 25 to 30 draft capital improvement program for the city. And I will now start sharing my screen. Okay, and hopefully you can see the title slide here. And we'll go ahead and move forward. We will revisit briefly the topic of what a CIP is and how it's funded, and that's for the benefit of our newer members to continue the education process of what the CIP is and its role in providing enhancements and capital maintenance to the system, and then provide an overview of our proposed programs and projects, and then review the next steps. So again, a reminder of what the capital improvement program is. It's the primary way that we are able to make enhancements to our transportation infrastructure and our overall system to accomplish the goals that we have outlined for ourselves in a variety of plans, such as the Transportation Master Plan, the Low Stress Walk and Bike Plan, our Vision Zero Action Plan. And so it is our intention to bring all of these objectives to fruition. And the best way to do that is through our capital improvement program. This is not the entirety of our transportation and mobility department budget. There is a separate operational budget that is reviewed by City Council and is not reviewed by the Transportation Advisory Board. The city code speaks to TAB's role being to provide input and provide an advisory role on guiding capital investment. And so that's why we review this aspect of the budget with you. So if you say, well, I don't see anything in here about filling potholes or snow response, that's because those things sort of live in the operational budget and not in the capital budget. So the capital improvement program is how we both take care of on a major maintenance aspect as well as in enhancements, deliver on the goals and objectives that we've outlined in all those plans I talked about. And we try to follow making those investments in a manner that's consistent with the priorities that are outlined in the investment policies from the 2019 TMP, where we say that system operations, Vision Zero, and taking care of what we have are our top priority. So we also have a new framework that we're working with. For those that have been paying attention, for a number of years, we had a sustainability plan, and then it grew into the sustainability and resiliency plan. And now it's the sustainability, equity, and resiliency framework that have the objectives of the community being safe, healthy and socially thriving, livable, accessible and connected, environmentally sustainable and economically vital. And each one of our line items in the capital improvement program need to be aligned with these objectives that are part of the SARE framework, from which all city investments need to be consistent. So this CIP that we're putting in front of you comprises a nearly $120 million investment. And that also includes $38 million in grants, which is much, much larger than you would typically see due to the Safe Streets for All $23 million in funding that we'll be spending over the next 5 years. And so that we saw that number bump up. Over the last couple of years, the 6-year CIP has been around the 100 million mark. And because of the infusion of the SS4A, it's now closer to 120 million. And that grant number bumped way up also due to the SS4A. It will vary from year to year, so we don't spend at the same rate from year to year, and that's due to the timing of the delivery of projects. There are a number of processes that we have to go through in order to deliver capital projects, which might entail obtaining floodplain permits, acquiring right-of-way and easements, relocating utilities, and all of those efforts take considerable time before we're actually able to get to the physical construction work. And so that means that there will be some years where we spend more than others. And so the average can fluctuate. On the program side, we can anticipate those costs a little bit more evenly, and they average about 9 million per year. So funding is made possible through the Transportation Sales Tax Fund. That makes about 70% of our program possible. Other funds that come to the CIP entail grant funds, gas tax funds, and development fund. But the sales tax is the primary driver of what we do in transportation. And as we've highlighted in the this month's memo as well as last month's memo, we know that 0.15% of the sales tax is going to sunset in 2029, and that will certainly have an impact on our ability to make enhancements and invest in the system as we look to the future. So the other fund we have is the Transportation Development Fund, which collects fees and taxes related to development and growth around the community. And then those taxes go into projects that are in support of responding to that growth and development. And the same is true of the Boulder Junction Fund. There are currently no projects identified in the Boulder Junction Fund. And that's because we've delivered on all the projects in phase 1. It is likely that in the next year or so that there will be some projects that are recommended for investment in the phase 2 portion of Boulder Junction, but that's still a question mark and to be determined in the future. We also are taking every opportunity to consider the pursuit of grants to match with our local dollars. And we talked last month about this, that over the decades, the primary funding source for our major projects has been the Denver Regional Council of Governments, or DRCOG, Federal Transportation Improvement Program. That's the primary mechanism by which federal funds flow to local agencies. And so we submit applications on a roughly every 3 to 5 year cycle, where we try to demonstrate the competitive aspects of the projects we would like to invest in and why they should be considered for funding. And the last couple of rounds, we were pretty competitive, and we hope that that will continue to be the case into the future. We also have other grant funding opportunities through CDOT, such as HSIP, TAP, and Safe Routes to School. And we've also been pursuing other federal opportunities. We pursued a PROTECT grant in partnership with CDOT to replace the CO7 or Arapahoe bridges over Boulder Creek last year. That was not funded. Fortunately, we know that the Safe Streets for All grant was funded. And as our ability to take on new grant pursuits opens, we'll continue to keep our eyes open for those federal grant opportunities and those cycles here over the next couple of years. So working against us, of course, is the reduction of purchasing power as the cost of construction outpaces the consumer price index. We know that the cost of being able to deliver a square yard of concrete or asphalt has gotten much more costly over the last few years. And this is seen in the Colorado Construction Cost Index that's maintained by CDOT. So the numbers have moved down, which is good for us, but they're still up double digits, which is still not great news. So overall, things have been continuing to move up. And you can see the trend line, the green trend line of how costs continue to go up in the construction marketplace, which erodes the ability of our funds to be able to deliver on the projects and programs that are important to us. So over the last several years, we have had our CIP divided roughly 50-50 between programs and projects. And you'll see that this year, we are showing a slight edge in favor of the projects, and that's because of the funding boost from the SS4A grant. If it weren't for that, then you would see that the programs would make up probably 51% of the overall program. And so now we'll take a dive into how we split that up over the modes. So this is something that we've spent a number of hours talking about in prior years with TAB as we present the CIP. We take a sort of a high-level qualitative view at the modal investment of each of the projects that are in the CIP, so that we can see how we're working to make improvements across all the modes of travel around the community. And you can see that it's fairly evenly split in 2025 and going out into 25 and 30. And then to see how that compares, we also have this chart that goes back to 2005 that shows the variation in year to year, where sometimes you'll have a project that's heavily transit focused and it might skew the numbers towards transit. Sometimes we're spending more on projects that have bicycle and pedestrian components. And there will be occasionally years that it'll be for roadway. So going back to 2007, you might be wondering why there was a big bump in roadway spending. That was a year that the city was making significant investment in the southern sections of 28th Street. So it was partly for road, but partly also for other investments in bringing up the multimodal components of 28th Street at that time. So the numbers that you see and the modal chart here are also depicted on a project by project basis on the right side of the table that it was a part of your attachment A. And so these are the programs that we're going to provide an overview of, which are largely focused on sidewalks and pedestrian facilities, multi-use paths, pavement, bridges, and streetlights and Vision Zero mobility enhancements as part of the payment management program. Here is a list of all of the projects that are in the CIP, and we won't be going through each of these line by line, but we're happy to answer any questions you might have later. In here in a moment, Lindsay's going to provide an overview of some of the more higher profile projects that are in the CIP. We also have these projects that are in the development fund, and we don't currently actually have a specific project that's funded for the development fund. We have development coordination for projects where our CIP might be interfacing with a private developer, and we want to make a minor enhancement. And we also have the grant match opportunity that is funded by the development fund as well. So key changes in the CIP from last year to this year is that we are proposing an increase to the payment management program mobility enhancements line item. In the last year's CIP, we had that shown at about $75,000 a year, and we have increased that, and I'll go back to that where you can take a look at it. So we're showing it for 25 at 150,000, then going to 200,000 and up to 250,000 in 28, 29. So we're showing an increase to that line item funding so that we can do more with the payment management program to make the vision of the low stress bike network and the Vision Zero action plan come to fruition. We are also showing reduced funding for the TIP TMP line item funding. So I'm going to move back over to that so you can see that on the top line here, that has been reduced to 1 million a year. Over recent years, that number has been around 3 to 4 million. And that is the primary way that we provide local match for our grant pursuits. So due to a number of factors that are working against us, the transportation fund, we needed to take a look at where we could make some reductions. And this is a line item that we are looking to reduce. Most of these other projects are already committed to with or they to the capital maintenance condition. And so when you look at where we can impose some reductions, the grant match is the one. So that is something we wanted to bring to your attention. Of course, we've got the addition of the SS4A project, and then two capital maintenance items, the Sumac Avenue reconstruction, which we talked about last month, which includes a cost participation component with the adjacent residents. And then the Folsom Bridge redecking is new. So the bridge deck on Folsom over Boulder Creek is in need of replacement. And so we have identified that to be taking place in 28-29 timeframe. If we don't take action on redecking the Folsom Bridge, we will have to replace the entire bridge. And 3 to 4 years after that at a 3 to 4 times cost of what it is just for the deck. So that is a new item, and that, it was a result of the bridge inspections that we've been doing over the last year, determined that that action needs to come forward as a part of the CIP. All right, I'm going to hand it over to James to talk about the programs that comprise the majority of the program side of the CIP ledger.
Awesome. Thanks, Garrett. Hi, everybody. I'm James Smith. I'm the payment manager. I'll be talking about the CIP programs, just giving an overview. First off, we'll talk about the payment management program. So the city established the payment management program for Boulder's 300-mile street system, which includes inspecting, rating all streets on a 3-year interval to maintain awareness of existing conditions and guide where pavement repairs will be made in the future. From spring through fall, we prioritize streets receive different types of pavement treatments depending on the current condition of the street. Street treatments such as crack seal, rejuvenation, and chip seal are generally used to preserve and extend the life of pavements in good condition, while other treatments like mill and overlay and full reconstructions are used to rehabilitate pavements in poor condition. Additionally, depending on the street, new road striping alignments may be incorporated into PMP projects, and that's the PMP mobility enhancements that we talked about earlier. And also the PMP is receiving supplemental funding from the CCRS tax for 24 through 26. I think the next slide, Garrett. So these are, I'm sorry, my screen's a little slow. So these are our sidewalk repair programs or pedestrian facilities. The City of Boulder's sidewalk repair program targets specific areas in Boulder each year to repair damaged sidewalks and install access ramps at intersections. This is our annual sidewalk repair program. In contrast, we have our sidewalk maintenance program, also known as a miscellaneous sidewalk repair program. And this program responds to reports of damaged sidewalk or ADA issues throughout the city. And then we also have our pedestrian enhancements, which delivers missing sidewalk links and ped crossing treatments. The next slide. Our multi-use path enhancements are focused on the Confluence Path area and the 2024 specifically on the Valmont multi-use path connecting Boulder Creek to 61st Street. And multi-use path maintenance is focused on maintenance of path pavements and pathway bridges. Next slide. The bridge asset management. This line item funds major capital repairs to transportation infrastructure, primarily bridges. Due to the several creeks and irrigation ditches that cross the city, there are 300 bridge structures on the transportation network that must be maintained. This funding makes investments in the bridge infrastructure to extend service life to avoid the need for total replacement, like Garrett was talking about earlier. And with that, I'll pass it over to Lindsay.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
So I'm Lindsay Mers, one of the project managers in the CIP work group. So I'm going to talk about the CIP projects. And so as Garrett had mentioned earlier, transportation CIP projects, we receive funding from grant sources. But with these grants, there's a required local match, which is funded out of the CIP fund. And so on average, this is $1 million per year. This is actually a reduced amount due to the reduced transportation fund. The local match is required for all the TIP projects that were awarded for the 22 to 25 and then the 24 to 27 and future projects. Also, the CIP fund will need to provide local match for all the Safe Routes to School and TAP grants, as well as all of the other federal grant opportunities that Garrett had stepped through earlier. And so I'm going to quickly do a refresher on some of the transportation CIP projects that are proposed for funding. So this is the Baseline Road project, which is focused on making Baseline Road from 30th Street to Foothills Parkway safer, more comfortable, more connected, really for no matter how you choose to travel along that corridor. And so the project has two phases. Phase one of the project was implemented in 23, and it took advantage of the pavement resurfacing as part of the city's pavement management program and installed some improvements sooner by using those city funds. And so in 2024, the city is developing the design for further improvements as part of phase two, after receiving federal grant funding from the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP funding. And so phase two project will create more changes to the corridor. There'll be additional bike lane protection, intersection and pedestrian crossing improvements, some transit efficiency and safety improvements, such as the floating bus island, and converting some of the phase one improvements that had been completed starting in 23 to more permanent features. And so construction of phase two is estimated to begin in 2025. The total funding need is 3.9 million, with 3.1 of that being the TIP grants. And so on Folsom, the corridor study and the preliminary design will find ways to improve protected bicycle facilities, transit stop improvements, pedestrian facilities, and intersection enhancements. And so the project will develop and evaluate conceptual transportation design options to improve multimodal, so think all modes, right? Peds, bikes, transit, and vehicle travel along Folsom. And it'll include the preliminary engineering and cost estimates for those transportation improvements. The preliminary engineering will produce plans for facilities for all users of all ages and abilities, and help meet the city's Vision Zero goal of eliminating fatal and serious injury collisions and improve travel conditions for, once again, all modes: transit, peds, bicyclists. The project is design only, with funding of $1.5 million, with $1 million of that in grant funding. The Broadway Bat Lanes project, so this includes design and construction of intersection improvements to provide transit priority at CO 93 and Broadway, at Broadway and Table Mesa, and then Broadway and Regent intersections. And so there's a component of providing analysis of converting some of the general purpose travel lanes along Broadway between Table Mesa and 18th to what's called the business access transit, or BAT lanes. And so that's planned to be done using lane restriping and signage. And so those intersection improvements will be set in place with the eventual conversion of the outside travel lanes to the BAT lanes, and improving the transit reliability along the which will improve the transit reliability along the corridor of Broadway. So construction of the intersections is anticipated to take place in 25, and the funding is 4.6 million, with 3.9 million in grants.
Lindsay, what are the intersections you named? I only heard two. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Broadway and Table
Regent.
Mesa, and Broadway and Regent. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know, I kind of stumbled over because I want to call it 93, but it's Broadway. Everyone knows it as Broadway. So. Okay, so next is Manhattan Safe Routes to School. So Colorado Safe Routes to School awarded the city of Boulder 707,000. I wish it was 7 million, but 707,000 to improve safe routes to the Manhattan Middle School. And so staff has worked with the school and the community and developed the conceptual design. And so construction is planned to take place in 25. And the funds are being used toward improved pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, with the goal of increasing safety and providing convenient options for traveling and encouraging just active lifestyles in that neighborhood. And then let's talk about US 36 multi-use path. So CDOT awarded the city of Boulder 936,000 to improve and extend the multi-use path along US 36. So this is from 4 Mile Canyon Creek underpass to J Road. And so design is expected to begin in 2025, with construction in 26, 27. And the goal here is to provide better off-street connections for cyclists and pedestrians up to the North Boulder area. And then finally, the East Arapahoe CO7 final design. So this is from 28th Street to Foothills Parkway. Will implement better facilities for walking, biking, and transit, which would be consistent with the East Arapahoe Transportation Plan. So this is a TIP and CDOT funded project, and it will take the 15% level designs scheduled to be completed later this year and advance it to final design by the middle of 25. And so CDOT's currently concluding those 15% design effort for the corridor from 28th to the eastern city limits. And so this project will just continue that work into final design. And so the project funds are 2.96 million, with 2.8 of that in TIP or CDOT grants. And then the recently awarded that SS4A grant that Garrett's been talking about will be used to implement some of these improvements from this design effort. And that's all I have.
All right, so next steps is that we're still offering and hoping that we'll be able to get a bike tour scheduled. We will meet again at the August TAB meeting to ask for your formal recommendation of the CIP, which will then go to Planning Board in September and on to City Council in later September and into October as a part of the overall budget approval process. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
I saw Trini's hand first. Go ahead, Trini.
So I guess I just want to express that I am incredibly frustrated with the time frames. I know it's not anything that you guys particularly control, but I wish there was a way we could expedite these projects. I mean, for example, the Manhattan project or the Manhattan School project, that's been on the table for a very, very, very long time. And to understand that construction is only going to begin in 2025. I mean, I know it's just an example of, you know, how things that are really clear and evident and that will save lives. And it's just a very frustrating position to be on this side of the conversation. So I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that we could do to just cut some of the red tape and just get these improvements done sooner rather than later before someone else gets hurt. I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I'll just focus on the Manhattan School project, but there's signage that advises of low visibility, and this is a road that kids need to take to get to the school. So when things are that dire and pressing, why can't we just follow a different protocol to get things done quicker? Is there anything that we could do? Maybe talk to City Council? I mean, is there any way to expedite the bureaucratic process?
So on every grant project, we have to follow a protocol of the grantor to us as the grantee. And Safe Routes to School is no different. CDOT is the administrator of the Safe Routes to School funds. And so there's amount of time that goes into preparing and coming to agreement on getting what's called an intergovernmental agreement or an IGA in place between CDOT and the city. And then when we come to agreement on that and that gets executed, there are a series of requirements that we must follow as staff to prepare and advance the design. The state requires us to go through a number of clearances. We have to demonstrate that we're not causing any environmental impact, that we're not causing any undue impact to adjacent properties. And if we are, that we have been fair and balanced in the way that we've acquired easements and right-of-way for the project. And then we also have to go through and demonstrate that if we are impacting utilities, that they've been relocated, or that we have sign off from all the utilities. That's a state law, whether it's grant funding or not. We have to demonstrate the level of impact that we have created on the utilities that are present in a corridor. And once you dig deeper than 6 inches, that state law is triggered. And so these are all clearances we have to get before we can even begin to think about hiring a contractor. And then once we go through hiring a contractor, that usually takes 2 to 4 months to go through the solicitation process. And then the construction also takes several months. So I wish that we could be faster. As a city organization, we've chosen to orient ourselves to pursuing grants so that we can do more with the limited dollars we have. But the trade-off in pursuing those grant funds means that we have to follow a few extra rules and deal with the frustration of the timelines taking longer. So we could make a decision to orient more towards city-funded only projects and not pursue grants so that we can expedite the process and eliminate some of these phases. But it would also mean that we would do significantly fewer projects from year to year. And so those are trade-offs that we can certainly explore. So it's I guess those are all a set of factors that we face routinely. I'll just also say that one of the other factors that constrains us is staff. All of our staff right now are all very, very busy. And they're each of my project managers in the capital projects team are probably working on 1 or 2 more projects than they'd like to right now. And so we are ramping up on this one to get it moving forward. But it would sure be nice if we had more people. If we had more people, we'd be able to get some of these things done faster on some cases. On other cases, some of the projects, it doesn't matter how many people you have, you still have to go through that federal and state oversight process.
That was a very complete answer. Thank you, Garrett. Trini, if I could just consolidate it, that what I understood Garrett to say, yeah, we could if we paid for it all ourselves in some cases. And just thinking about what the projects that Lindsay just ran through, you'll notice, you know, what the total budget was, and then how much of the grant funding there was. And so the leftover is sort of our local match, like how much of City of Boulder money went into it. And it's, I don't know, somewhere around 10% on most of those ish.
Absolutely no way I'm suggesting we stop asking for grants or applying for grants.
Yes.
I am one of the main proponents to getting more money for the city to be able to complete these projects.
Yes.
It's just overly frustrating to hear that things are happening and that we know how to fix them and that we have to go through all of this process. And I wish, like what you suggested in your white paper, for example, that there were ways that we could just, for certain things, we could just say, okay, well, these are going to take priority because these are like on our high impact network or whatever. I mean, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I have to think about what I'm going to say so I can
Okay.
have a coherent thought. But thank you, Garrett. I appreciate your answer. And no, by no means am I suggesting that we don't ask for grants or apply for grants. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that all you have, Trini, for now?
For now, yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, Mike was next.
Yeah, I do see a lot of great projects, the ones you've mentioned and others that are happening, and maybe some of them have been a little slower than I thought they would be, but others are happening that I didn't know about. But my major concern is revenue. And you really went over this, given the fact that sales tax funds nearly 70% of transportation and it's been relatively flat for nearly 20 years, while construction costs are up significantly and asphalt and concrete went up 24% between 2021 and 2023. That's huge. This is something that's common throughout the country and has been identified by strong towns that sales tax is not really a great basis for funding transportation projects. And ideally, we would fund a lot of this from the users of our roads, but it's hard to see instituting something like a congestion fee in Boulder at this time, although it's something to keep in mind. I'm interested in 2 things that you mentioned. A highway users tax. I'd like to hear where that
Mhm.
comes from and how much of that we get. And also the fact that I believe all of our property taxes go to the county, and what part of that do we get back from the county for transportation, and could that be a basis for a better way of funding transportation going forward?
So I am informed enough to speak generally to your questions, Mike, about the funding. So the Highway Users Trust Fund is Washington DC speak for the gas tax. So that's when people buy gas at the pump, there's a portion of that revenue that goes to the feds and then flows to the state and then down to the local agencies. And there's a formula for each local agency as to how much they get. So we could work with our financial analyst, Karen Steiner, to let you know how much we get from the gas tax each year. That's also a declining revenue source because as cars get more fuel efficient and as more people switch to electric vehicles, that is a fund that we shouldn't be relying much on for the future. You are correct that the transportation department gets zero funding from property tax. That's incredibly frustrating for residents when they have concerns about the condition of their street or the lack of a bike lane on their street and say, I pay so much in property tax, why don't we have a bike lane here? And we let them know that actually none of your property tax goes to funding transportation improvement or maintenance in the city of Boulder. The general fund does get some measure of property tax. I don't know how much. That's also something else that we could follow up and get you some information as to how much goes to the general fund. In 2018 and 2019, there was a transportation funding group, or a working group that was working on a series of recommendations. And Tila, I think you might have been either a part of or affiliated with that effort. That
I was on tab at the time, but it was Johnny Drozdek and Mark McIntyre.
Okay, thank you. And so that working group was had developed a set of funding recommendations that, as you're referencing, is more directly connected to the users of the system or a little bit more sustainable. I'll just editorialize here. I've always thought it interesting that if I decided to go buy a package of socks at Target in Boulder, that means that the transportation fund went up. And what does socks have to do with? But that's the way the system's been set up. And it would be like utilities. When I turn on the water faucet, I'm paying for it. And there's a direct connection to the use, right? It would be nice to be able to have a more of a direct connection to users of the system and the way we fund it. So we could also go back and pull out some of the recommendations from that working group effort that you could become familiar with.
And I'll just add on to everything Garrett said, spot on. The city council is really working with the city right now on a citywide financial strategy because the decline in sales tax over time is really an issue that is affecting all of the city family, all of the city departments, not just our department. So in addition to the other factors that Garrett covered, like the declining purchasing power, we're just now seeing that we're in a more constrained fiscal environment, but it really is a citywide conversation at this time. And I'd encourage you to take a peek at the recent council meeting where they talked about the city's financial situation. And I think there will be more conversation to come this year around the citywide financial strategy.
Thank you.
And I think if I could just add on one more thing that I learned during that process was that taxes are hard and fees are easy. And so if you have like a great 3 a.m. thought and it's more, so for instance, like adding on a fee to registering your vehicle in Boulder County or adding on a fee to your utility bill or something, that's an easier thing for the city to implement because taxes involve sort of state governmental authority and it gets hairier. So I invite you to spend your best efforts to do something other than a bake sale. But it is what we're confronting now is a problem that we've seen coming for a little bit. And it's sort of the forecasts didn't even take COVID into account, and that's actually made things, and COVID related inflation has really exacerbated some of the problems we were expecting to see. Darcy, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to build on Trini's comment about the urgency of certain projects. And I wanted to ask about the status of the, we used to have something called the Transportation Improvements Lab or something, where we would try things out, and I know that that was controversial in places, but I'm wondering what temporary improvements are still possible and feasible in those places where we know the work needs to get done quickly. So some kind of, tactical urbanism is the phrase that comes to mind, but some kind of temporary project that would be cheap and easy to do, that you're not constrained by all of the regulations around the grants, to just get done, so that something gets into the streets or into the places around the schools where there's real urgency for those projects. I'm just wondering about your thoughts about the possibility of that kind of work.
Garrett, do you want to speak to that?
So, yeah, I can point to some recent examples where we've done that with the Vision Zero Innovation Program. You've seen those types of treatments around the community, like on Quince or on Glenwood. And so, and then right there in front of Community Cycles building as well, 26 and Spruce, we have
That's
those
true.
types of
Yeah, I have
treatments,
seen
right?
some of those little like chicanes and things. Yeah, so I see that you're doing that. Is it possible to do more of that?
So the interesting thing is that on the corridors where we have the majority of our problems, the CAN, right, the core arterial network, the majority of those corridors are state roadways, and the state will not let us do those sort of pop-up treatments on their roads. They want a more permanent solution. That the locations where we do have control, streets like 30th and Folsom, there is probably some philosophical debate as to the value and the utility of having a temporary versus a permanent. And I guess at this point, I'll hand it over to Valerie to provide a little of the thoughts about what we're thinking about the utility of doing a short-term versus a longer-term improvement on those corridors.
Yeah, I mean, I think echoing what Garrett just described, our arterials are really where, because of the speeds and the volumes that we're working with, those more interim treatments aren't always an effective treatment. I think an example of where more interim style treatments, like our Vision Zero Innovation Program implemented a couple of years back, a good example of that would be a project that we're collaborating on with our Parks and Recreation Department. So they are working on a new design, for Violet Park for some time. And I think it will now have a new name called Primos Park. And they actually sought a Safe Routes to Parks grant to do kind of a walkability assessment for that area. And, that's really the first step towards identifying what the needs are. And even though that project's not funded for transportation infrastructure and improvements, they are going to be building from the learnings of that grant funded effort to then pursue other, grant opportunities for either Safe Routes to School or Safe Routes to Parks through, the state programs. So that's an example of, even though it's, step by step, it is a place where they may be able to, garner funds through those Safe Routes to Parks and Safe Routes to School programs to do interim treatments, test out their efficacy, and then, after that, apply for more capital dollars for permanent improvements through those programs. So it is a tool in our toolbox, certainly, but I think on arterials, we're really looking at, more capital intensive improvements to address the needs, those unique needs that those corridors have.
Thanks. I understand that. I'm just thinking of like the Manhattan Project as well. Like that's not on a, really major roadway.
It's a city road, yeah.
Road. I mean, it would be possible to do something there to mitigate the current issues that are going to be addressed by future funded projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are really great ideas. Really appreciate you raising this topic. You know, at this time we just don't have, you know, funding appropriated for the cost to design and install those treatments in such a way. We've really shifted our budget from programs like that to the CAN to build out projects like Baseline, like Iris, you know, eventually other corridors that you know, may take a phased approach, just like we did with Baseline. So, you know, I think Baseline is a great example where it is an arterial, and we did do, you know, really interim treatments as part of that initial implementation with some of our local dollars. To test out how the operations are. So an example would be the protected intersection at Mohawk and Baseline. That's where we use some interim treatments to see how it works, get some improvements on the ground now while we waited for those capital dollars to become available through DRCOG TIP. So there are times where it is appropriate to use interim materials. I think that's a really recent tangible example where we are already doing that. But noted, you know, you're interested in seeing more of these types of treatments where it's possible.
So
Yeah, thanks very much.
Valerie, building on that, I just was wondering, so what happens to these temporary things once you stop using them and they become permanent? Like, are you talking about like the flex posts and all those things that were there? Could we move those around? I mean, do they have to be new? Is there any way to like upcycle these materials and use them for other places that we need them at?
Yeah, you know, often they do experience some wear and tear, so they're not always feasible to relocate. You know, sometimes the structures that bolt them into the roadbed wear out over time, things like that. So, or the epoxy, the glue, you know, they get dinged up a lot, which means they're doing their job as treatments. So it is possible. You know, that's something that we're really interested in with our new tall curb treatment that's out there on Baseline with the phase 1 project. You know, if there's stretches where we end up installing other treatments during the phase 2 effort, that means we may have some leftover tall curbs that could be employed in another condition. So that's always something we're thinking about with our material selection.
Yeah. Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, Tab? Okay, I just wanted to, I'm not sure if my perception is correct, but Garrett, thanks for highlighting how the local match line item is getting fairly dramatically reduced from sort of levels that have been consistent over the last several years. Because it looked like a number of the projects, the ones that Lindsay went through, are, you know, getting these like ideas to design, initial design, conceptual design, final design. And that is, you know, always an essential hurdle for then going and getting grant money to implement them, to build these things. But I'm concerned that we are setting ourselves up for another round of sort of public opprobrium about setting expectations too high, like promising that we're going to change XYZ because we're spending money now to develop, you know, fancy designs. And like 30th Street, like, you know, they did the community working group. I forget what it was called, but that was before I was on Tab. So that was a hell of a long time ago. And now we're putting down what they envisioned, and we might be seeing another sort of cycle of this, of sort of planning and an aspiration and a lot of intensive and high quality work about thinking about what we want, but then setting ourselves up to have to disappoint the community and say, sorry, we can't afford this. What kind of messaging would be appropriate or helpful to sort of set the stage for public expectations, looking at, you know, the next 4 or 5 years of funding, because we're really getting to that rock and hard place that we saw coming.
Right. So we've been having these conversations amongst ourselves internally.
Sure.
About what it means for the future. I'll just be really blunt and say, if we were 3 years in the future, I don't know that we would have had the local match to be competitive for a Safe Streets for All grant. And because the local match is not insignificant, it's $5 million, right? And if we that represents our next 6 years right now of local match.
Right.
And so what a missed opportunity if we couldn't get 23 million because we couldn't come up with the 5, right? And though that's an anomaly. The next time we get a grant of that size, I doubt any of us will be on a Zoom call. But there's still lots of these more regular, frequent opportunities through Dr. Cog Tip, like that's making the baseline phase 2 possible, and is making the 30th Street project that's now under construction possible. Those are the types of projects where we put in 1 to 2 million, and we can typically get 2 to 5 out of a local match, that we can really get a lot of value and deliver on those commitments at a realistic level, but make a big difference to a corridor. I'm worried that we'll go from a place right now we've got multiple corridors that are about to be or currently are under construction, that will go to a place where we're gonna be doing 1 or 2 projects a year, and that's it. That's all we'll be able to do in terms of the grant projects. You asked for a nice, concise elevator pitch message. I didn't.
No, I didn't.
Package it up for you nicely, but that's kind of the that's the reality we're looking at if something doesn't change.
Okay, so what needs to change? We need more money dollars.
We do. We do.
And is this a matter of allocation in the budget? Is this a matter of different revenue stream? Is it both? Is it what flavor of fairy godmother are we looking for here, and how can TAB help?
So it would be great to have Natalie here with us so that we could hear her view, and I'm sure Valerie's got some thoughts about that, but she might kick me under the table for saying this if she were sitting next to me, but I think we should revive that working group and start putting those recommendations back out there for steps we can be taking to bolster sustainable transportation revenue.
Yeah, I actually had a very long and good conversation with Natalie last week about this, so which I'm very happy for, because now I understand this a little bit better. Valerie, if you have any thoughts, that's great. I don't think Natalie, I mean, she and I recalled the work that had gone on that working group, 2018, 2019, is that when it was? And those recommendations just kind of went onto a shelf and died somewhere. And I don't know why or where. I mean, I think that there was some serious thinking about it, and some serious thinking about how politically and practically feasible any of those ideas were. And they all just seemed like too big a lift at the time.
I think I can speak to that. We, as a department, I think what Garrett's mentioning is really important, is that, and I think you said it too, Tila, tonight, is that this is an issue that's been known for some time. It's not a new issue. It's not like any one thing caused this issue. It's really a constellation of factors. And that working group did come to a place of, really looking at a range of different revenue sources and what would be involved in them, and came up with some recommendations on what might be the best to pursue moving forward. And I think they had a meeting at council in February of 2020. So we can all remember what was happening around that, or right immediately after that time.
Nothing.
Right. And so, we went into a different mode as a city, as a society, and that work is still viable and, really could be revisited. As Garrett mentioned, there's a fantastic body of work that, I think Chris Hagelin from our department, along with some other folks, led during that time. So that's where I think the conversation can continue. Of course, we'd really want to have a broader discussion here at TAB, especially when, our director's present. So I'll leave it at that, but I will just mention that there were viable ideas that came out of that process that we could really retrace those steps and continue a conversation. And, I mentioned the citywide financial strategy earlier, and that's really important because anything we do in the context of transportation funding has to be within the context of the citywide financial condition. And so, that's something where, trying to channel Natalie at the moment that, TAB would really want to think about how you have that conversation as an advisory group with council, because that is a matter that they, elevated as one of their top priorities from this previous council retreat. And that's, a great opportunity for TAB to pitch in some thoughts.
Terrific. Thank you. Trini, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share with you guys something that might, give us some hope. This is something at a federal level, and we advocated for it twice when we went to DC. It's the Sarah Langenkamp Act, and this specifically would remove the necessity of the match for federal funding. So it would allocate funds from other places, and cities wouldn't have to match in order to get the grant. So
for what kind of projects?
Transportation. Look,
Just in general?
Look, it's called the Sarah Langenkamp Active Transportation Safety.
I saw your link in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you can look into it, and that's something that we advocated for through the bike summit and right now with the families that we went to in DC. So
okay,
like a little, hopefully, I mean, I know it's getting a lot of traction, so who knows?
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Anything else from TAB on this?
If it's okay, Tila, I'll just take this moment to underscore all the great work that Garrett and his team did this year working on the draft CIP. Again, we'll be bringing that to you in August, for a vote of recommendation to council. But I just want to lift up that while we have some of these tough choices and a more constrained fiscal environment to contend with, staff are being super creative in how we make the most of the dollars that we do have. I think I want to just highlight, there was a slide that Garrett presented where he talked about some of the big changes this year, and that's where a lot of thought went into what can we do to continue pursuing the enhancements to our system while we really focus on core maintenance, which has traditionally been a place where we haven't been fully funded. And so we're always balancing that. But I just want to just commend staff on being really creative this year with this new information and really trying to make sure that we're hitting our priorities as a department, our vision, our shared goals here. So that's hopefully a helpful context for what you've heard tonight.
Thank you, Valerie. Appreciate that. All right, to be revisited. Garrett, you mentioned the CIP bike tour. So this is a thing we do every year where we ride around, you pick a little route. It's, I don't know if it's wildly popular, but I always like it. And we kind of visit either future CIP sites or recent ones that have been done. You do a great job. How are we going to schedule that?
I'm going to lean on Meredith to help us with that one.
Okay.
Okay, I saw
Meredith's
thumbs up.
giving it 2 thumbs up. She's accepted the responsibility. Excellent. Yes, Trini.
Can we give some thought on how Jen could join us?
Yes, so I talked to Natalie about that a bit as well. I was hoping to hear back from her before this this meeting, but I haven't yet. And so Jen, I will reach out to you directly to talk about what Natalie and I discussed, and I'll see if I hear back from her. But we have several thoughts, and so I was just gonna do that directly with Jen. Thank you, Trini, for raising that. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing nothing else at the moment. Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, James. Let us move on now to agenda item 7, the US 36 North Foothills Highway Bikeway feasibility study.
Yeah, and I'll just do a quick introduction. Tonight, we just want to welcome Alexandra Phillips from Boulder County, who's the project manager for this effort for the county. Daniel Sheeter on our staff will be giving a quick overview and introduction before we launch into the meat of the presentation tonight. But I'll hand it over to Daniel.
Where's the Coke? There was one.
Thanks, Valerie. And I think I might need different
Oh,
settings
I
to
guess
screen
it's
share. Oh, there it
downstairs.
goes. Great. Thank you.
There's a trick for you. No, there's a Sprite downstairs if you're interested.
Okay. Is that coming through for everybody?
We'll have that then.
Great.
Yes, it's looking good.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Valerie, and good evening, TAB members. My name is Daniel Sheeter, Principal Transportation Planner in the Transportation and Mobility Department. I've been a member of the Interdepartmental Steering Committee for the North Foothills Bikeway Feasibility Study over the past year plus, and tonight I'm excited to share information with you with help from Alexandra on an upcoming milestone for the project, as well as seek TAB support for the department to continue collaborating with the county on the next phase. So with that, I'd like to introduce Alexandra, and as Valerie said, she is the Boulder County project manager for the project, to share some background and the preliminary findings from the feasibility study. She was last at TAB at the February 12th meeting earlier this year, where she gave an overview of the project and a preview of the engagement plan that occurred and the engagement that occurred in the spring of this year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alexandra.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks for all your work on this project. The steering committee has met many times. So we can go to the next slide. I will talk about the reasons for the study. And of course, we start just the way the TAB meeting started, with crashes. That 30% of all the severe and fatal bike crashes in the unincorporated county, this is not city crashes, happened between J and 66 on US 36, or also known as North Foothills. So that's a big reason for this feasibility study. Next slide. And in the county's master plan that was adopted in 2019, there was recommended a separated bikeway. The community survey that went before the adoption of the master plan also pointed to the need for a separated bikeway, plus a lot of public comment did too. And then we also applied for a federal grant. As you were talking about earlier, we need the federal grants for the large chunks of money to do the feasibility study. Next slide. Oh, and before I go on, please do, I think we have time for a Q&A at the end, but please do interject, because some of you are new, some of you know quite a bit about the project. Okay, so yeah, next slide, thanks. So one of the things we wanted to do was we know that there are a lot of cyclists already on US 36. Most of those cyclists are what we call the strong and fearless. And we wanted to be able to open up a separated bikeway that accommodates all types of cyclists. So that's what we were looking for, and that's more visioned in the center photo of a separated bikeway.
So Alex, just since you invited us to jump in, when you're saying on US 36, we're talking about only this portion of US 36 north of Boulder, between Boulder and Lyons.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. So basically, this study extents start just north of Broadway in the city of Boulder and go to the intersection of the North Foothills US 36 and Colorado 66, which is the road to Lyons. That's the extent of the study. And that's one thing, there's always things you can look at more and more and more, but you have to focus on getting the core done. And the main stem of the bikeway is what I'll be talking about in future study and future slides. So yeah, you can move to the next slide, thanks. So with what I already said, so we wanted to have a hard surface bikeway that was plowed in the winter, maintained year round. Want to locate it as much as we can in the CDOT right of way. Sometimes that right of way is quite wide, sometimes it's not. It is not an even right of way up and down the corridor. It's more like this, up and down the corridor. And we also needed to separate the bikeway from the road. And there's two ways to get that separation: by actual separating it out by 20 feet or more if possible, or by putting in barriers. And I'll show what that means in a minute. Next slide. So the study was looking at the survey of the right of way. We need to collect that. There was actually no on the ground survey of how big that right of way actually was. Some of the environmental information to come up with the conceptual alignment. The study will also have a cost estimate. And I must say that right now we're in a kind of a funny moment of time where the study is going to be completed in July 2024. The first draft of that study was just released to the steering committee hours ago. So we're kind of like, we've got the draft, but the steering committee folks have to make sure it's all presented correctly, and each of their jurisdictions have everything is correct before it can go more to the public, but that will be happening very soon. And then again, the funding, and I want to touch on that we did get very important local match from the city of Boulder in two ways. We got it actually, is this, let me, City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks. Oh, that's right. Okay, so we got it from, sorry about that, OSMP, and also Boulder County Parks and Open Space. Even though they're within Boulder County, they also gave some of their budget for this study. We also got a very generous donation from Cyclists for Community, the $30,000 donation, which covered some of the inflation costs that we were not counting on, and also allowed us to go a little bit more in depth than we thought we could with the initial funding, which was very great. Next slide. So here's the steering committee I keep mentioning. Daniel is the main representative from Transportation and Mobility in the city. So we met 9 or 10 times. We have one more meeting coming up in about a week. There has been several meetings, as Daniel mentioned. I have I presented at TAB in February, also presented, it was on the OSMP Board of Trustees agenda in February. We made other meetings, but we have 2 more coming up. One is with OSMP board, the Board of Trustees on June 12th, and then finally to the Board of County Commissioners for a hearing to adopt the, or to approve or not approve the study. Next slide. So with all of that, looking at the environmental factors, the right-of-way, the environmental resources we're trying to avoid, we basically came up that the vast majority of the alignment will be on the east side. And when I say alignment, what I mean by that is this is probably where the bikeway is going to go, but it could shift this way or that way by a little bit. But we're getting closer and closer as we narrow in. We do have I call them the blue bubbles, where future analysis is required. One of them is on the south end. I'll be talking about that a bit more. There are also just bring in more. It's not that they're not important. It's that they're so complicated that we needed all the information that we're gathering in the feasibility study, and we need more time to talk about those blue bubbles.
Alex, are these segments? Are these like separately funded projects? What's the significance of the segments?
So basically, in case we want to be able to break it up for funding purposes and move forward with different segments, we had also looked at possibly asking the public which segments they wanted built first. We ended up not including that particular question in our public engagement, which was a remote public meeting, and a in-person public meeting, and a survey, which is outlined in your memo, because we realized that most of the crashes are in 1 and 2. The highest volume of traffic is in 1 and 2. The narrowest shoulder is in 1. So it's really not a, so it was obvious which segments kind of were the most immediate, top of mind, but there's also, each segment kind of has its own issues. So it just made sense to break it up that way. Next slide. So when I talked a little bit about separation, this kind of breaks it down too. So the top has not only this 20 feet minimum separation, we looked at having a 30 feet separation, which sometimes we can do, but sometimes we can't because of right of way. So we're going for at least 20 feet, but we're also, we don't have a lot of that undulating topography, major steep up and down hills, if you note from the side of the road that you can see. So the ideal is that top where we can separate it that way with the 12-foot bikeway. The two drawings on the bottom show one where there's that we don't have that 20 feet at all, but we are able to separate it with a barrier, with a physical barrier. There's other places where we might have that 20 feet, but because of the really challenging topography out there, which you may not even notice as you're zooming by in a car, but if on a bike or as you're just really aware of it, you can see it, that we, even sometimes when we do have that physical separation of the 20 feet, we still do need retaining walls and barriers, which adds to the cost of the project. Next slide. So here's the kind of ideal, and one way of seeing this is the photo on the right is actually the US 36 bikeway, which is confusing because it's also called US 36, but this is the road to Denver, excuse me. So that has that 20-foot separation. Next slide. And here's again US 36 without that 20-foot separation, but with a barrier. So that gives you an idea of what you're looking at. We wouldn't change the shoulder of the road itself. And there are times we would need to put in railings on for protection from the cyclists from the slope. Thank you. Thank you for that little circle of it. Yes, next slide. And we did do an online survey as part of the public outreach. More information on that is outlined in the memo, but I did want to point out that those that ride US 36 now, 75% would ride the bikeway if it was built. That was a big question people had, because those strong and fearless cyclists that like to ride in big groups or whatever, would they actually use the bikeway? And the answer is, for a large part, yes. And those that don't ride US 36 now, would they ride the bikeway if it were built? And 95% said yes. Next slide. So next steps, and we are actively pursuing funding to advance this project, and we're looking at many different sources of funding. I think your earlier discussion reflected on all those different sources, which is mostly true with the county as well. That we're looking at federal grants, we're looking at our own transportation sales tax money, we're looking at many different sources, but nothing has been directly identified at this point. In the next phases, we'll be looking at a more detailed topographic survey, collecting more information that will allow us to really pinpoint where the alignment's going to be. And the last bullet point there is a lot more coordination with the steering committee for connectivity and the south end of the project, which is one of those blue bubbles that is kind of the most complicated. And that's why I moved the next slide, if you can move to that. And here is what we call the south end. You see Broadway there in the Dakota Ridge neighborhood. We've identified several different alternatives alternative 2, which is the purple, is actually doesn't use much OSMP land at all. Is it okay if I say OSMP, open space and mountain parks within the city of Boulder? And then there's different alternatives. Alternative 1, which is that teal color, would use and upgrade the existing underpass, but then cut right through OSMP land. Alternative 1A would be essentially the same route, but build a new underpass. And then alternative 3A would be a very large underpass underneath US 36, and there would be a lot to work out there because there's quite a bit of private land and not quite enough room to squeeze it in there, but we'd have to look at that on how that would all fit. So one of the most important parts of the next phase of this project is to be looking at all the blue bubbles, including this one, as I call the blue bubbles, the areas where future analysis is required. Next slide. Oh, and here's the big one. So the funding. So there's a lot to funding. So there's the actual constructing of the bikeway, the actual build the bikeway, pour the concrete, pour the walls. And the big graph compares how these look, how the price, the $51 million for North Foothills Bikeway compares to other projects and why it's so expensive. And several of you probably are aware of the 119 Bikeway, which is starting construction this fall. The actual just construction cost is just a little bit cheaper, but it was a lot simpler topography, a lot simpler, even though there is going to be a bunch of underpasses and one overpass, but the topography made it simpler. So all that comparison is just the actual construction cost, but there's so much else that needs to be built into that cost. The risk reserve, the cost escalation, otherwise known as inflation, and other things, and administrative costs and all that. The total cost of the bikeway is estimated to be $91 million, which sounds gigantic, and it is, but I was hoping that this graph could show it a little more in perspective of what that cost looks like. Next slide. Before I hand this back over to Daniel, is there any other questions? Or maybe I should wait till Daniel does his slides and then I'll take questions.
Well, the first question is, are there questions on the information shared and these preliminary findings from the feasibility study that we're sharing tonight? So we can start there. And then we do, per the memo, the staff recommendation is for a motion from TAB tonight to continue support for the project and for staff to continue collaborating with the county on next steps, which are still timeline of which are to be determined, but that is also what we're seeking tonight.
I'm toggling through my screens and I don't see any hands up. You can put your actual hand up if you have a question. I've been working with Alex for a little bit on this, so I'm barely up to speed, but it looks like no questions at this time. Oh, Mike just unmuted.
Jen raised her hand.
And Jen raised her hand. There you go. Thank you. Hi, Jen.
I just want to make sure I understand everything right. So you have this plan, it's gonna cost 91 million, but funding has not been secured?
Yes,
Okay.
if you're asking, yes, there is no funding yet. And that's kind of in some ways the whole process works, where we really can't apply for the grants until we're finished with this feasibility study. And we are getting to the point where we're finished with this, but we're also meeting internally with staff and with our Board of County Commissioners to see if we can identify other funding. But we're needing this feasibility study to give us the ballpark cost of things before we could start applying. So
Mhm.
yeah, transportation projects do take time.
How long do you expect it to take before you're ready to apply for funding?
Hopefully not very long. We're hoping that we can start applying for funding quite soon. We just don't know exactly the process. We will know more after the August Board of County Commissioners hearing, and even before that. So it's not like once this study is done that we're just setting it aside. We're very much actively looking at next steps.
So that's why you're already asking for approval without funding.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I understand now.
Okay.
Thanks for the questions.
So Alex, when this goes to the county commissioners, what will you be asking them for?
To adopt the report
Okay.
and talk to them about prioritization and funding. Yes.
Okay.
They might have some edits. The way this is working right now is I just mentioned that this report just came out today for the steering committee. So
The
people
draft.
like Daniel and those folks can make edits on it. Once those edits are incorporated, we'll be able to share it more widely, and including to the Board of County Commissioners and to TAB and to the general public for other questions. But one of the big things is for the Board of County Commissioners to adopt the study and to figure out, to give us some guidance on funding.
Okay. Are you anticipating this will be a difficult conversation? Would it be something useful to have for TAB or other groups to encourage public participation, or is this not really where we're at this stage?
The Board of County Commissioners puts a lot of weight on public engagement. So I think they always want to hear from the public, and I'm not just saying that because they do really emphasize that. They want to know if TAB supported it, if the general public supports it. The difficult conversation is, where's the money coming from?
Yes, yes.
but yeah, public input to the Board of County Commissioners is always welcome and much needed to say what's a priority.
Thank you. Okay, so I suppose, oh, hi, Trini. There you go.
Just super quick, Alex, would this not fall into the Safe Streets for All grants? Because there's a new window that just opened, and I know there's a lot of money that's being left behind there.
Yes, and I actually can't speak to that directly. I know we looked at that one, and this project specifically doesn't fit within their parameters. And I'm sorry, I can't say why. I can get you that information later, but we're always looking at where possible funding could come from. Actually, as I'm saying that, I might be wrong. Let me get back to you on that. One other thing that I didn't even mention is that alongside our project, the Parks and Open Space within Boulder County is also looking at a project for a wildlife crossing. And there's, so we're talking to CDOT about that. We're talking about getting on CDOT's 10-year plan, which helps with funding, but also where we can pair these projects together to help with funding, where that would make the most sense. So we're really looking at it from very different viewpoints. And let me get back to you on the safe routes to school, because I know that we look closely at that grant. I mean, safe routes, yeah, safe routes grant.
For all.
Yeah,
not too many schools in this corridor.
Yeah, it was called for schools.
We might go to school.
It's hard to get used to. Yeah, safe routes for all.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex.
Okay, it looks like that's maybe all the questions on the presentation. And so now I think would be an appropriate time to look at the motion language. Staff is requesting that TAB make a motion tonight in support of the North Foothills US 36 bikeway in general. and for the department to continue collaborating with Boulder County on the next phase of the project. So
Tila,
I would,
I will
yes,
just,
go ahead,
thanks
Dan.
for kind of giving an overview on that. I just want to add, which I think we didn't mention in detail in the presentation, which is the Open Space Board of Trustees, Mountain Parks Board of Trustees will be meeting on Wednesday night, and they will
Right,
be
the
considering a
12th,
very
yes.
similar,
Mhm.
on the evening of the 12th, and they'll be considering a very similar motion there. The board will be.
Mhm.
So we're kind of sharing similar sets of information to both boards and kind of working with Marnie and OSMP to guide that item to the Board of Trustees. So.
Okay. I'm looking again at our packet for this evening and I don't see a memo on this. And the only reason I'm looking is to see if there's any suggested motion language, but is what's on the screen right now sort of where we're at for that?
There,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
No,
Yeah.
there was a memo and there's a box with specific language, but it does mirror what's on the screen.
Okay, thank you. So I'm like literally looking now. I'm like, where did that go? I'm looking on this the City of Boulder website, and I do remember that there was a separate email of a new. But no, that was just presentation.
We can confirm what's loaded to the city's website, but Darcy's
Oh,
correct.
there it is. I see it. There it is.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to open up discussion now among tab members about our feelings. One thing that saved a bunch of time in the past is just to basically, without actually voting, take a straw poll among tab members about how you're feeling. And so just, show a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. I need some discussion. Can I just see some thumbs to see where we're starting from? I see. Okay, Jen has a thumbs down. Everybody else got a thumbs up. Jen, I would love to hear your perspective.
Sorry, new computer. I'm
No
learning
worries.
every day.
No worries.
I just question what the amount of money that we're spending it there. I feel like we are so quick to always throw money towards bike lanes, and I wonder if maybe there's something else we should look into, like maybe just, more money should go to repaving sidewalks. I was just out the other day in Boulder, and I was like appalled at sidewalk conditions. And I'm like, why are we not worried about that? And we're more concerned about biking.
Can I say something to Jen?
Yeah,
This is
please.
a multi-use path. It's not only for cyclists. This is for all road users. And
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that was.
Yeah,
And
thank
that's
you,
like my
Trina.
fault.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because I kept saying bikeway, and what I mean by that is it's built, managed or designed for bicycles and certain speeds, but it will definitely be open to pedestrians, to people walking, wheeling, wheelchairs, that kind of, to those uses as well.
Either way, why are we not fixing current problems instead of like creating new solutions for new things?
So Alex, did you have a slide at the very beginning about sort of crash rates and deaths on this road? This is so Jen, to sort of contextualize it, my understanding is that this section of road is it the worst one in Colorado for vulnerable road users?
And that makes more sense. Thank you for pointing that out.
One thing that I really failed to do, because I'm so, there's certain tab members I've addressed before on this, but I'm with the county, and this is a county project outside of, and it's called unincorporated county. And it's people that have lived in the city for their entire life, and in the county, see, I just did it, have trouble differentiating between what the city of Boulder can focus on and what the county, the unincorporated county does. And it makes it even more complicated because city land is sometimes outside what you think of as the city of Boulder. So this is a county projects on other roads. So we can't really be looking at, like, let's say, city sidewalks.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Again, I'm new.
That's
I
fine.
don't know the history, so I appreciate you telling that to me.
And then the other thing I want to add, Jen, just it's very closely related to our conversations on the CIP, but projects of this size, complexity, and cost, they will not happen without grant funds, matching grants from the state, from the federal government. And so we're talking about a $91 million cost, but we're not saying that the county of Boulder is going to spend $91 million. That's almost certainly not going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that will have to be grant funding with local match.
Right. And because you know, a good number of, somewhere around a third of the respondents who were interested in this bikeway were City of Boulder residents. Like, there was something on the slides earlier.
Yeah, there's
so you know, it is a place that Boulder residents who are braver than I am tend to ride. And there is an impact, and there's an ongoing impact, literally and figuratively, to cyclists. And we also know that the more cyclists that drivers encounter in an area, the more aware that they are of being careful around cyclists. And so it's kind of a loop. It's a feedback loop, where if you can get the people who are too afraid to bike there, walk there, roll there, actually out there, drivers become more aware of their role in a bigger ecosystem, I suppose, where they have to be cognizant of users in different modes. And for that reason alone is for me, a very compelling reason to support efforts like this.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So our straw poll was, you know, for kind of in favor. I'm wondering if other tab members want to kind of speak to their support. Darcy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I do think this is a really significant and important project for the reasons that you stated, Tila, that it's not only important to make the infrastructure safer for those pelotons of cyclists that go out in big groups and, you know, take really big, long rides. It's important for the purpose of getting more people comfortable with the idea of making those connections to all the trails in that area, North Boulder, you know, having the opportunity to go to Lions if they want to go that far. But there are a lot of other connections. Alexandra's slide with the potential alignments.
That one just skipped it. There you go.
But those little pink arrows, I think, are really significant here because they show where people are going off of 36. So I think that's, you know, she mentioned also that segment 1 and segment 2 are the, you know, most heavily used by bicyclists because they're able to, you know, make a lot of connections. And so that also opens up this infrastructure, you know, this really significant highway to more people to make more bicycle connections, which is important to our larger goals of getting people out of cars and giving people more opportunities to travel in different ways. And so I think it's a really significant project, and I'm grateful for your work on this, Alexandra, and yeah, I think we should support it.
I think my only other observation to piggyback on what Darcy just said is that as e-bikes are becoming more available, both financially and to various, you know, physical body types and abilities, I'm seeing many more older riders than I used to see, and people who, you know, used to never consider riding outside of town. The e-bike has effectively sort of collapsed the geography, and it has made some of these places more accessible to people who might have been curious about doing a longer bike ride before. And things like Neva Road, beautiful. Like that, if you have, and the St. Vrain Road, beautiful. But it was kind of too far away for some people before they had the ability for e-bikes and other, assistive, like electric motor assisted vehicles that would fit and would be suitable on this kind of multi-use path. I think we're only going to see an explosion of those in coming years. And I think we're smart to be building infrastructure that is appropriate and suitable for teeny tiny things that are not mini cars and do not belong on a highway, but ought to be considered and encouraged as ways for people to get around, just to connect with the community, get outside, be a little more active, get out of their cars. So I'm so pleased we've made such progress on this. It seemed like an untenable pipe dream a couple of years ago when C4C was really pushing for it. And so to see Boulder County Transpo staff embrace it, work on it, address it, I'm so encouraged. Mike, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just first to say, this is really exciting. And I was confused when I first saw this on the agenda, confusing it with 119.
Right.
And then I realized, oh, this is a whole new thing, and this would be a great place where I could bike or e-bike, where I'm too afraid to now. But I also missed the part about this being Boulder County versus our board representing the city. So I'm just wondering what would be the ratio of funding from the county versus the city, just very roughly.
I'll take a stab at that. The answer is I don't know. During the last grant, we asked the city to put in some sort of matching funds, and I'm sure we will do the same again. The amount of matching funds would be a very small amount of the total project, and the amount of matching funds that we would ask the city for would be smaller than the matching funds the county would put in. That's all I can say at this point. I'm sure I'll be back at TAB at some other time with more information as we know it, as we find those grants.
Thank you.
Rini, go ahead.
I just want to thank Alex and just echo what everybody has said. As someone that was hurt in this general area, I am highly appreciative of having a safe way to get around. I've always said that if people feel safe, they'll ride. People will go out, they'll adventure. But if we don't feel safe, it's never going to happen. So thank you. I mean, the poll says, right, 95% of people.
Right.
That's a huge number. So thank you so much, Alex, and everybody that's been working on this. I really appreciate it. And you have my full support, obviously.
Yeah. Great. Can we get the proposed language back up, please? Tab, do we have any further discussion on whether we would like to support the bikeway and for the department to continue collaborating with Boulder County? No, I don't see any further discussion. Does anyone have any motion language to propose? Oh, you're all new with this. This is so cute. Okay.
We can just use what's on the screen.
Yeah.
Indeed, that's how it happens a lot.
Well, let me read it first.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I will move.
Excellent, Mike. You would like to make a motion? Let's hear it. Meredith is all ears.
I would make a motion to support the North Foothills US 36 Bikeway connecting Boulder to Lyons, and for the department to continue collaborating with Boulder County on the next phase of the project, which will include further analysis and design and the selection of a preferred design alternative, i.e. specific trail alignment with consideration for linkages to the City of Boulder's existing bike network.
Genius. And Darcy seconds it. Does anyone wish to make an alternate motion for consideration?
I think it sounds great.
I didn't think so. Let us open discussion on the motion now. Now there's a motion before us. I think it's terrific. I think it's maybe a little more detail than we need, but if county staff thinks that that would be helpful detail to include, I have absolutely no objection to any of it. I have no amendments and, you know, suggestions for improvement on the motion language. Any further, does anyone else have any comments on the motion language in particular?
Nope.
Okay. Well then, I think that we will move to a vote on the motion before us. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your work on this, Alex.
And I appreciate all the feedback, and going to Tab is very helpful. Thanks.
Great. Can you remind me again for the record, when's the meeting before the county commissioners on this?
August 13th,
Okay.
1 to 4. It's the daytime meeting, August 13th.
Okay, Tab. As we discussed, well, we'll do our little debrief of the retreat, but that's an opportunity for us to do what we said we were going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, now we move to matters. I understand we have one thing from matters from the staff. Hi, Jean.
We do. Thank you, Tila. So we'd like to welcome Jean Sanson from Transportation and Mobility tonight, as well as Carl Geiler from our Planning and Development Services Department. We are so lucky to have Carl here. He is a fantastic partner to our department in all things, you know, connecting transportation and land use. He's an expert in his field. He's awesome to work with, and we're really appreciative of him sticking it out tonight to the 8 o'clock hour to be here. So I'm going to hand it over to Jean.
Hi, members of TAB, Jean Sanson, Transportation Mobility Department. I'm a principal transportation planner, and much of the work that I do focuses on policy and regional long-range transportation projects, much of which we've been discussing this evening. And I just want to echo what Valerie said. Thank you, Carl. Carl is our senior policy advisor with our Planning and Development Services and is quite knowledgeable on many of the bills that we're going to be sharing with you this evening. So I would ask if Veronica could please share slides. She's going to be advancing those for us.
Yes, hold on. Let me pull that up.
While she's getting that pulled up, I'll just share that what we're going to do this evening is just provide you all a very high-level summary of the transportation and land use related bills that we think would be of interest to the board. It was a very busy season for the legislature. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Veronica. Can we go to presentation mode?
Yes. Oh man, as a technical host, I've actually never shared PowerPoint myself. So there we go.
Slideshow. There you go.
Oh, look at that. Thank you. Okay. So what I was saying is that it was a really busy year for the legislature. So this year there were about just under 100 more bills than were introduced in the state legislature last year. So there was a lot to track. And I would also preface this presentation with the idea that each of these bills that we're going to be covering are pretty complex. And we are working with the city's chief policy advisor, Carl Castillo, to understand the details of each as they apply to the city, whether they impact the city or benefit the city. But knowing that there are many details of these bills to work out, we are going to be coordinating closely with relevant departments and the state over the coming weeks and months via rulemaking, knowing that the details of many of these are to be determined. So let's go ahead and jump in. Veronica, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide. Okay. Senate Bill 2465. First, I would just like to acknowledge Trini for being such a strong advocate for this bill and for lending your face and your story to the importance of passing the Mobile Electronic Devices and Motor Vehicle Driving Bill. So What does this bill do? It makes it a primary offense to hold a cell phone in an unsafe manner while driving. And that's going to be at the discretion of law enforcement. And there are certain exemptions for what unsafe means. So those exemptions include things like handheld radios, if you need to contact a public safety entity, emergencies, and certain job requirements. As most of you know, because I think you've all been tracking this pretty closely, this bill has been in the works for a long time and well overdue. But it's continually run into equity concerns over the fact that it might increase contact between law enforcement and people of color. So specifically, a major concern with this bill has been that leaving enforcement at the discretion of officers could lead to increased racial profiling and disparities. So some of the information that we've learned since the signing of the bill by the Colorado State Patrol is that as it's signed, the determining factor in whether a driver would be pulled over is whether or not their driving behavior or lack of attention to driving results in a disregard for the rules of the road of their surroundings. So in other words, it's illegal to use a cell phone while driving, but it requires a higher level of criteria for the individual to actually be pulled over and issued a citation for it. So for context, under the current law, an officer has a wide range of discretion to find that driving occurred in a, quote, unsafe manner, that it would only take a swerve or a wide turn or driving above the speed limit, or if you're driving too close to a bicyclist to find that a crime occurred. So essentially, in other words, drivers should assume that an officer can and often will find unsafe driving if they have a phone in their hands. And some of that language did get worked out in the 11th hour of drafting this bill before signature. And I would just want to pause here and ask you all as a board, and perhaps Trini specifically, since you've been so closely involved with this, what you think of the bill as it's passed, and if there's anything in there that's really left undone to be worked on. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to.
No, Jean, I can tell you that this has been the hardest effort that I've ever been involved with as far as legislative work. I mean, it was almost killed the night before the session closed. It was just a enormous effort from so many people, and I am so proud that Colorado is the 31st state to have this law in place. I think that there's a lot of things to work into, and as we move forward, it could, we can improve. There's a lot of room for improvement, but it's a huge accomplishment, and everybody that worked on this should be incredibly proud. So I'm very, very happy with what we were able to achieve. Yeah.
Thanks for that context, Trini. And then as this last bill, I don't need to read this for you, but obviously there will be a robust public awareness campaign that will be coming forward as this bill gets enacted. So thank you again to Tab and to Trini for all of your work on this, from the dark ages to maybe the later ages, right?
Jean, I just want to jump in. So when you say it's going to be a primary offense, that means that offense alone is potentially a reason for an officer to pull somebody over. Whereas, and previous to this, you had to pull them over something else and then say, "Oh, I noticed you were using a phone." Is that right?
That is my understanding, but I would defer to Trini or even Devin for that. Just I want to make sure that we've got clarity on that.
I think you're right, Tila. It is a primary offense. And it's considered reckless to be holding your phone. So instantly it becomes.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, okay.
What do we know the date this goes into effect?
It was signed last week on Wednesday, and I believe the next day was what I read somewhere, but officially January 1st of next year. But I do believe that once the governor signs it, it becomes the law. So it should be effective. And that's why there's so much, the prevalence of educating the public about this is so.
Quite often the law is drafted with an effective date of enforcement. So yeah. So yes, it's the law, but it doesn't become effective until XYZ.
January 1st of 2020.
Yeah, so I think it's January 1st typically.
Yeah, I know in New Zealand, if you're looking at Google Maps on your phone or touching it, you'll get pulled over. So hopefully that, people aren't going to be used to that here, but it needs to happen.
Yeah. Well, 30 other states are in the same boat. So I think there's a lot of education that will happen simultaneously. So hopefully that'll become the norm and other states will fall into place.
Okay, Jean, what else do you have?
Oh, I got more. Okay. Veronica, am I forwarding? It was the year of transportation, folks. Senate Bill 195, protect vulnerable road users. So some of you might remember earlier this year in the legislative season, there was an earlier version of this bill that proposed a new registration fee based on the weight of the vehicle to generate more revenue for Vision Zero projects. So given that heavier vehicles are more likely to cause serious and fatal injuries, particularly for vulnerable road users. But that got stripped from the bill. There were some contentious conversations around new fees. I don't think it precludes counties from actually enacting those types of registration fees themselves, but it will not be state mandated. So what this bill does do instead is it doesn't generate new dollars, but it does direct a portion of statewide transportation dollars to be used for Vision Zero projects. So it's current revenue, and it will now be directed towards those projects that benefit vulnerable road users. As I mentioned, these are complex. So another very important component of this vulnerable road users bill is the expansion of state authority to use automated vehicle identification systems, otherwise known as AVIS, to detect traffic violations on state highways. So those would be our red light cameras, our speed enforcement cameras. And what's pretty neat is that as a city, we've been ahead of this curve on this, and we've already started to use automated enforcement on state highways. So what this bill does is it further directs local governments, DDOT, our Colorado Department of Transportation, and State Patrol to coordinate on unified guidance for the use of AVIS on state highways, so that, for example, if you're on a long regional highway, you are not getting ticketed, within each jurisdiction as you pass through. So we're going to be working closely with the state. We're in regular communication on this topic, and we hope to expand AVIS to more locations. Any questions related? Okay, let's move forward. We can get back to that too. All right, thank you, Veronica. Rolling forward to the next slide.
Okay, sorry.
No, this is
a little
fine.
slow in feedback
Running
here.
late, so thank you. We've got a lot to cover. Senate Bill 32, methods to increase the use of transit. So this bill aims to build on the success of two prior fare-free programs. I think you're all familiar with RTD's Free Fare for Youth pilot, which is expiring this summer, and the Free Fare During the Ozone Season program. At one point, the state was looking to use general funds to continue both of these programs, but through various iterations of this bill, what ended up happening is the state is now going to be directing $10 million annually from the state's existing multimodal options fund for these programs. So given the limited amount of dollars, it's likely going to mean that each recipient or transit agency or organization will probably choose either fare-free or youth fare, but likely not both, depending on the cost. We have been told that RTD will likely be using these dollars to continue the Fare Free for Youth program, which has been wildly successful, as has the Ozone program. But it's simply a matter of budgeting. And then another piece of this bill, which is kind of neat, is that it requires that a committee be set up to study the creation of a statewide transit pass program. So there are certain year milestones by which the committee has to be formed, and when their recommendations come out, with the idea that over the next 5 years, a recommendation would move forward to implement, at least at a pilot level. Okay. Let's see. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, Senate Bill 184, support surface transportation infrastructure development. I like to just call this the rail bill. So essentially this legislation enacts a congestion impact fee on rental cars up to $3 a day to mitigate traffic congestion and pollution. So that fee will go into effect in 2025, and it's estimated to bring in approximately $50 million a year to the state, mainly for the continued planning and implementation of rail projects. With the idea that, and it's not necessarily in the bill, but the idea behind this is that it's going to generate state funds, and again, a limited amount, $50 million a year, but those can be used, as we've been talking earlier, to leverage federal funds to advance rail projects. So, specifically, it talks about the Front Range passenger rail. One key aspect is that the bill authorizes what is the Colorado Transportation Investment Office. Essentially, that used to be the High Performance Transportation Enterprise. It's a lot of fancy words, but it's basically the entity that's responsible for managing the toll roads in the state. And it directs them, RTD, Front Range Passenger Rail, and the Colorado Department of Transportation to enter into an intergovernmental agreement or even a separate legal entity to construct and operate, and this is interesting, what they're now calling the Northwest Fixed Guideway Corridor. So think Northwest Rail. That would include an extension of Northwest Rail to Fort Collins as a first phase of the Front Range Passenger Rail service. And there are dates associated with this. So the state is requiring an implementation plan later this year. And by March of next year, a plan to begin providing Front Range Passenger Rail service by January 1st, 2029. So those are pretty specific and ambitious goals. But we also know that the clock might be ticking on some of the federal funds that would be available to actually advance passenger rail, not just Front Range Passenger Rail, but passenger rail throughout the state, including mountain rail service between Winter Park, Steamboat, Hayden, etc.
Jean, what's the $50 million a year? Is that the expected revenue or is it capped or?
That is the expected revenue.
Okay, thank you.
From the rental car fee. Yeah. We've also heard that this new fee might be challenged in the courts. So stay tuned and we'll continue to keep you updated. All right, moving on. This is really a big one. Senate Bill 230, oil and gas production fees. So this bill has gotten a lot of press. And it was a long and complex negotiation between the state, the oil and gas industry, and leading environmental organizations. This new oil and gas production fee is estimated to generate approximately $138 million a year. So it's a sizable amount of dollars, with about 80% of that revenue being used to offset impacts on climate and air quality by funding transit. So the state is going to be meaningfully funding transit to these levels beginning this year, with the goal being to increase transit ridership and bus frequency to improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The state's Clean Transit Enterprise will oversee the program, and I'm just going to walk through real quickly the splits of those dollars. So 70% of it will be used for local transit operations. So these funds will be dispersed to transit providers through a formula based on population size, disproportionately impacted communities, existing transit service, and other criteria that has yet to be developed that we will have an active voice in helping to shape as the Clean Transit Enterprise takes on this conversation in the coming months. Their first meeting on this topic will be later this summer at the end of July. The funding must be used for transit operations to increase service. So this is key. This is about transit operations as opposed to large-scale funding of capital projects. Now, there is a smaller amount that is available to local governments for capital projects or transit operations, and that's 10% in what they're calling a local transit grant program. That's going to be a competitive grant program. So for example, the city of Boulder could be eligible for those dollars through a competitive program. And then 20% would be available for rail funding. Again, another sort of, as we stack the dollars for these ambitious rail projects, this is another stack of dollars that could be used to do things like leverage federal dollars to ensure that the Northwest Rail, Front Range Passenger Rail, and Mountain Rail projects actually come to fruition. I suspect there might be some questions or thoughts around this bill, so I'm going to pause.
I'll just wait and say, Jean, you're absolutely right that this is huge and has big implications for the potential for better transit service all over the state. And it's really, really exciting. I've been following these bills closely, and this is the biggest, most exciting one, I think.
Thank you, Darcy. Okay, so now I am going to hand over the presentation to my colleague Carl on Planning and Development Services, who's going to switch gears and share information related to land use bills, but there is no land use without transportation and vice versa. So with that, Carl, I'll let you continue.
All right, thank you, Jean, and thank you, Valerie, for the introduction. As they noted, I'm Carl with Planning and Development Services. My primary role with the city is to make updates to our land use code. So this is kind of new territory for us, with the state getting involved in land use and zoning to the level that they have this year, particularly these two bills that I'm going to cover tonight that are zoning and transportation related. The first one that we're going to talk about is what we call the Transit-Oriented Communities Bill. That's actually not the title of the bill. It's something like State Land Use Criteria for Strategic Growth. The Transit-Oriented Communities is a piece of that, or what we call the TOC bill. We've been working with the state for several months on the intricacies of this bill. So you can see it's quite complicated, but basically the intent is to require jurisdictions to remove barriers to housing units along well-used transit routes so that we can optimize on the number of housing in the community to address the housing crisis, but also to optimize on transit use in those areas. So we've done some mapping. We're going to have to dig into this a little bit further as we move forward, but basically it requires that you to take a quarter mile of a transit corridor that has bus service per the RTD system optimization plan. That's every 15 minutes for at least an 8-hour period on weekdays. So that's what's mapped here. So you can see that the black lines demarcate those areas that are a quarter mile from those routes that are eligible. So you basically do an area calculation of all the areas that are within that transit corridor area. And the state bill basically requires that there be an average density of 40 dwelling units per acre in that area. So that's pretty high for Boulder. Some of our, what we used to consider high density in Boulder is really like 20 dwelling units per acre, or some zones were capped at 27 dwelling units per acre. We do have some recent projects that have been built that are, upwards of 50 dwelling units per acre. So it does put some strain on our zoning to figure out whether this can be met or not. So what it does is, by calculating that 40 dwelling units per acre, it develops basically what's called a housing opportunity goal, or what people have been calling the HOG. And that spits out a number, basically, is how many dwelling units are possible per the zoning in this area. It doesn't mean that you actually have to build them, or it doesn't mandate that developers have a minimum density. What the bill requires is that you look at your zoning and potentially have to update your zoning so that it doesn't stand in the way of the potential of that number of units being developed. So in our analysis of this bill, initially, the housing opportunity goal for Boulder was upwards of almost 170,000 dwelling units. So again, it's an aspirational goal. To put that in perspective, the city of Boulder only right now has about 47,000 dwelling units. But so it sets a very high goal so that your zoning is moving in the direction of getting more housing units. As we've been working with the state on the particulars of the bill, that housing opportunity goal has gone down. So I think right now it's closer to 140,000 dwelling units. So basically what the bill says is you have to designate transit centers within that transit corridor area. And that's what those like colored areas are on the map. Those are our zoning districts that potentially could allow for at least 15 dwelling units per acre. That's what the bill says. In order to designate a transit center, it has to be at least 15 dwelling units per acre. But the basically using all those zones, you have to calculate what is possible in those zones per the zoning, and you have to at least meet that housing opportunity goal. So obviously this is very complex. We're probably pretty ahead of the game with the mapping. There's a lot of other communities that have to like work this out as well. What we found is that we passed some ordinances last year that changed our residential density calculations, the dwelling units per acre that are allowed in many of these zones, particularly the industrial zones and the business zones, basically removing some density caps. So it's starting to look, based on our analysis, like that we're in pretty good footing to meet this bill. So we're not in panic mode at the moment. There are some changes that we're expecting to make to zoning in coming years to meet the East Boulder subcommunity plan. So we're feeling pretty good about meeting this, but we do have to dig into it just to make sure that all our calculations are correct. Another piece of the bill is that it actually requires that any discretionary review for residential projects on properties that are less than 5 acres inside, they have to be non-discretionary. What they did do in the code is, because we have site review, which leverages affordable housing for, if you add additional floor area, the state bill does permit that. So, but it has to basically be something that the applicant elects to do if they don't meet our setback or height limits. So again, we're looking pretty good in meeting this. There are some new grant programs that are in the bill. It's a very lengthy bill. It's basically meant to leverage money towards affordable housing and infrastructure around transit, as well as looking at neighborhood centers, which basically in the bill means areas that are outside of the transit corridor area that may be a future transit area. So you're basically diverting some infrastructure to those areas that might have transit service in the future. So it's a very complex bill, and we can stop here if there are any questions before we move forward.
Hi, Carl Tila here. I'm trying to understand the difference between a transit center with a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre. You've identified, what a transit corridor area is, and that's a pretty busy corridor, but what makes a transit center?
Yeah, a transit corridor area is basically the sum total of all those areas that are mapped, that you're seeing on the screen, that are within the black lines that are a quarter mile from those qualifying corridors. So there is a total acreage for that whole area, and that's how you get the housing opportunity goal. Transit centers are those areas where you're counting those areas in the zoning to meet the housing opportunity goal. So because there's a minimum density of 15 dwelling units per acre, the vast majority of the transit corridor area does not qualify. So a lot of those areas that are in the the gray, are single family neighborhoods. Those would not qualify. You can't count those dwelling units. You can't count that zoning. So it really forces us to look at those neighborhood centers like Table Mesa or areas around the university, the Boulder Valley Regional Center, downtown, 29th Street corridor. All those zones have zoning that potentially could get us to meeting that housing opportunity goal. So we will have to move forward with designating specific transit centers in the future, and it's probably going to be these areas that are shown in the color other than gray. Does that make sense?
I didn't follow that.
Yeah, it's just it does. There's another graphic that we don't have in this presentation, but it's the state understands that not all areas are going to have zoning that meets the requirements. So you have to
but doesn't this require cities to change their zoning?
It does.
Yes,
And we may have to change our zoning. So, but ultimately we have to submit a report to the state, and we have to map out those transit centers and show them the zones and show them the calculations about how the calculation in those zones will meet the housing opportunity goal. And then the state has to either approve it or deny it.
Okay. What makes a transit center a transit center?
It has
This
to,
is-
it's just it's basically, there's actually, could you advance the slides? There's some background slides towards the end that might help answer that. It's past the final slides. Yeah, if you look at this slide, it says transit center criteria. So applies to parcels that are a quarter mile from a transit corridor. The total area in those transit centers alone has to meet that 40 dwelling units per acre average.
I gotcha.
So
So it has to
some
currently be no less than 15.
right, and it has
Oh.
to average 40 dwelling units per acre. So there might be
Just
some
allow
zones
it,
that are
okay.
like 20 dwelling units per acre, and there might be others that have to be higher than that to average out.
I getcha. Thank you. That helped. I'm
Yeah.
with you now.
Okay. If we could go back to the regular slide.
Jen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think transit-oriented communities is great, but I am concerned about not being able to offer non-public transportation options. And it's great for if you do single-use vehicles, but for example, I live in Thursday Pearl. And I see so many buildings being built and no bus stations. And that really kind of concerns me because I feel like, we're all rushing, focusing on we need more housing, but we're forgetting the other piece. So my question would be, is there any consideration to this whole bill? Like other than personal cars?
Yeah, it was certainly a consideration when we were working with the state on this. Obviously, what we map out as routes that are eligible are only per the RTD system optimization plan. It doesn't actually mean that these are routes right now that are functioning every 15 minutes. A lot of them aren't. But it's because the state bill is based on that optimization plan. It's looking into the future. So we did have some concerns about that. And we did present this to the Council Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, and they raised that as an issue as well. And they wanted the state to put in some criteria that says that if it's not actually operating at that level, it shouldn't be eligible. But that's something that actually didn't stick in the bill. So it certainly was a concern that we had when we were working with the state on this.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Darcy?
Yeah, along with that, I wanted to ask, so in conjunction with Senate Bill 230, so there's all of this potential wonderful new funding for transit. And as Jen just said, there's no, the housing and transit oriented communities bill doesn't mandate, funding for transit on these corridors. And so I'm just curious, Carl, about what conversations, I mean, like you just said, the system optimization plan from RTD says certain things and their current service is a certain level, but how do you think the city of Boulder can work more closely with or compel RTD to actually service these routes in the way that they are envisioned to be served?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing. I think the state approach was, get the housing there so that the demand goes up. So it almost kind of forces RTD to be like, okay, there's a lot of people here now that can use this transit. So I think that's the approach they took rather than, using transit first and then build the housing later. But maybe I'll pass that to Jean on the question about what work we can do with RTD to get them to kick up service.
Yeah, thank you. And just as a little bit more context, to your point, Darcy, there's a lot of mistrust at the state level about RTD's ability to even provide on the system optimization plan. So for board members who might be new to the system optimization plan, that's RTD's plan to return service to communities by 2027. So for instance, Jen, you mentioned that you're at 30th and Pearl and you do not have service at Boulder Junction. Boulder Junction is closed. But Boulder Junction and service, the Flatiron Flyer 4 and the AB2 are planned within RTD's system optimization plan to resume operation by 2027. There is no guarantee about when between now of June 24 and 27 that will occur, but it is in the books. And so with this distrust, there was a period of time where there was a bill that had been introduced at the legislature this past season to reform the RTD board itself. There was that much mistrust. That bill was pulled, and essentially the governor, initially, and I can't speak for the governor, but let me editorialize a little bit, right? Like, I don't trust RTD. I will not give them more money until we reform the board. Through negotiations and conversations, that bill died, the RTD reform bill, because there's some other budgetary and financial issues ahead of RTD that maybe take priority. And the governor did sign the bill to provide more dollars for the operation of transit service. So we're pretty confident that RTD is going to be able to restore the service that's indicated in the system optimization plan. The city of Boulder will be at the table as the Clean Transit Enterprise is working through what those criteria, what that formula will be for providing additional funds to transit agencies to restore and even expand service. And just one more point of context that I'd like to share with you all is that Boulder County, through a TIP grant funded project, is going to be initiating a Boulder County strategic transit service plan in the coming year, which the city of Boulder will very much be a part of. And that's the idea that we know that RTD will probably be able to provide only a certain amount of service. And if they focus on the regional service and we have much larger plans for transit service beyond what they can provide, what does that gap look like? How can we as Boulder County communities partner with RTD to provide more transit service? And one of the bills that I covered earlier this evening, there are actually incentives for regions or areas to establish what we call regional transportation authorities, new funding, new districts that actually could create funding from taxes. Very long-winded answer just to say that we attack this at so many different angles. There is not one silver bullet, but we're also open to any suggestions and recommendations that you might offer to us as staff.
That's excellent, Jean. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, Jen.
Well, I kind of feel it's my duty as a resident here to mention that several of my neighbors moved here specifically for that junction, Boulder Junction station.
Yes.
And we're all of us low income. That's kind of a big deal. And all of a sudden RTD is like, nope, we're not doing it. And every time I talk to RTD, they're firm with, we are not going to open no Boulder Junction station. And I'm like, it just doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't even consider it.
Thank you.
So I know you can't affect that, but I just want to make it known.
Yeah, that hasn't stopped me from having a little rant on the record every other meeting or so.
Right.
No, I appreciate that. And, from one thorn in people's side to another, keep it up.
Well, I know really, really makes me angry, and I'm not alone.
Yeah. Well, you're helping elevate the other voices, so I appreciate that. Okay, Carl, was there one more?
There is. Before we jump to that one, I just wanted to add that we have until the end of 2027 to be fully in compliance with this bill. So we actually have to send a report to the state. Now they've moved it to June 2025, where we basically have to report to them like what we think we need to do to meet this bill. But then we'd actually have to make the zoning changes by that deadline. So I think we're ready to jump to the next slide. So another bill that we've been following is House Bill 24-1304. This one was kind of surprising to us. We didn't know whether or not this would pass or not, but it did pass. And basically, the state is requiring cities that anywhere within a transit service area, which, to make things like extraordinarily confusing, the transit service area is not equivalent to the transit corridor area in the TOC bill. The criteria is a little bit different. So it's basically like anywhere that has bus service every 30 minutes for a 4-hour period. So it's a lesser frequency. The cities or jurisdictions cannot have parking requirements for any multifamily residential projects. So you can see, based on this mapping that we've done, it applies to a vast majority of the city. So again, we're talking about residential projects. They haven't really defined what multifamily residential is, so we'll have to dig into this a little bit further. It even says that if there's any conversions of commercial buildings to mixed use where the building is more than 50% residential, there can't be parking requirements for those either. A caveat to this requirement is that cities would be able to require up to 1 parking space per unit if there are studies that are done by, engineers or some sort of parking demand study that indicates that there would be a substantial negative impact to a particular area in terms of parking. So that we're still having to look at that and see what that means. But it basically requires a report to be filed with the state to review any project that has that kind of report applied to it. So this is something that we have to look at in coming months. We do have until June 30th, 2025 to determine, how we're going to comply with this. We're already embarking on a parking code update anyway. We had planned on that before this bill passed. So the timing is actually very aligned with the timing in the state bill. So we're going to be going to City Council, I believe it's in September, with a study session where we're going to get guidance from them on what kind of updates should be made to our minimum parking requirements in our land use code. What this bill also says is that you can have maximum parking requirements. You can still have ADA parking requirements. You can still have bike parking requirements. There's nothing in the bill that says that overrules any kind of parking that's required for housing projects relative to their funding or any agreements. You can still have unbundling requirements. You can still have TDM requirements. But again, the big thing with this one is no residential minimum parking requirements for multifamily residential projects. So we'll be digging into this further in coming months to figure out exactly how we'll be complying with this next year. So any questions on this one?
Yeah. Can you explain again what the map is here with relevance to this? Is that's encompassing the areas where minimum parking requirements would be prohibited?
Yeah, so this map is looking at bus routes that have a frequency of at least every 30 minutes, and for at least a period of 4 hours in the day. The TOC bill was different; it was every 15 minutes for an 8-hour period. So it's in basically pulling in most of the bus routes that operate in Boulder. So you can see that most of the city is going to be impacted by that in terms of multifamily residential projects.
So these letters and numbers, those are
zone districts.
Zoning designations.
It's really
yes.
just
it's the color. We're looking at the colors.
Yeah, the color. That's all the colors of the different zoning districts. So what we're really trying to show is just the black lines, the bubbles. Basically, those are all the distance requirements from those corridors, and like I said, you can see that there's little pockets.
If it's inside the black lines, then
correct. Yeah, this was a very quick and dirty kind of
That's
map
great,
that we
yeah.
threw together after the bill passed. So we'll probably have to clarify
No,
that more as we.
I really appreciate your and Jean's responsiveness, because I'm the one that asked for this. But you can see there's a lot of interest, in the board, and so I'm pleased that you came to us tonight. I want to just express my appreciation for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, Carl, just a clarification on Tila and Mike's question. So for instance, even though it's within the black bubble, maybe an RL1 zone would not necessarily be a place where you'd find a lot of multifamily residential. And so it's not necessarily the full area within these black lines to which this would apply. It's just the zones that have that type of allowable use. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we're going to be looking more at, the zones like the red and anything that says RH or BC. These are our commercial, our high density zones. Our industrial zones also allow for multifamily residential. So it's really those areas that you see like apartment buildings or things like that where this would apply.
Well, there's been a lot written about how government's mandating people, giving parking away for free is it doesn't make any sense. And so I really hope the city council just abolishes all minimum parking requirements in the city, so we don't have to deal with maps like this.
Yeah, I think given the extent of this map, I think it does speak to, probably a citywide application of this. But again, we have to talk to council and get the direction from them.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any further questions, Tab? Looks like we're all happy. So happy. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Have a good night. Is that all for Madison staff?
That is, thank you, Tila.
Okay, thank you so much. We are now on matters from the board, a little behind schedule. Luckily, I have nothing to say on the debrief. I won't say nothing. But it's time for us to debrief if we have any comments. I was very pleased with how the retreat went. I thought it was a useful exercise for once. Not to denigrate prior things, but I'm just grumpy about retreats. And my one take home was that it felt more simple and more attainable for us to just circle around the idea that as tab members and as I had noted earlier, an unusually advocate heavy sort of tab that we have right now, that this might be a great time for us to use our various advocacy skills and networks to advance things that we want to have influence in going forward in the next year. And I think that's kind of where we landed at the retreat, that we were in general support of the direction that staff was taking on its sort of focus areas and where it's emphasizing things. We still wanted, as in the last 2 years, to support staff's continuing efforts on CAN in particular. And then as these projects, move from sort of conceptual to actually getting on the ground, to use our various abilities of influence and kind of probing into pockets of the community that cities in general and Boulder in particular might have had trouble reaching in the past, to try to get new voices and new awareness of what the city staff is trying to do in transportation efforts. That's what I got out of the retreat, and I thought it was pretty gratifying. Does anyone else have any more to kind of add to that, to Trini?
Just really quickly, I mean, I really enjoyed seeing everybody in person.
Oh, it was so nice in person, wasn't it?
Yeah, I love being able to give Meredith a hug. I mean, it was just a totally different thing. So just wanted.
Anyone else? Great retreat, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice one for me to end on, I have to say. I see a placeholder here for Iris Avenue, and Meredith, I'll be honest, I do not recall what we were gonna do. I was expecting that we would probably have some discussion. I think that's kind of all that placeholder was about. And I do want to acknowledge, earlier they seem to have dropped off, but we did have a number of people from the public kind of watching whose names are familiar. We've of course received a lot of emails, and I'm sure that there will be more to come. But in particular, I was hoping, given that, sort of direction that we had agreed on as TAB members at the retreat, to be able to think about and talk about at this moment, perhaps, how we could be more useful, accessible, available to the public, and sort of try to take some of the weight off of staff's shoulders about hearing and responding to Iris Avenue feedback. My understanding is, Valerie, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but there was going to be an update, like a study session or an update to council on the 27th. And now that's not happening because council will not be meeting that evening.
It is now happening. So
it is. Okay.
They just last week were kind of trying to figure out when they would really establish their recess, that kind of summer break that they always take. And I think they were looking at how to maybe extend it a week or two, and they finally landed on a strategy for that. And the outcome was that we will still have the Iris Avenue study session on June 27th. So that is still in place. And if I could just take this opportunity, I think, Tila, what I think perhaps you and Natalie had spoken about was just that is a study session where we'll be bringing a ton of information to council. Yes. And so I think, just an opportunity here at this meeting, since we won't have a TAB meeting in July, an opportunity for you all to just share your thoughts about that leading up to that appearance at council in June. So of course, everyone here is encouraged to, attend that study session. And, you may all, wish to express your views on the project so far in advance of that council.
I was going to say, yeah, we would have to express our views at the moment here, correct? Because at a study session, there's no input by the public or by boards in general. And then just to follow up a little further, Valerie, at the study session, the staff will still not have arrived at a preferred option, but staff intends to identify a preferred option shortly thereafter.
Yeah, so a little bit of a forecast. We won't be bringing, a staff recommended alternative for that area in between the bookends of the corridor, where the 4 design options are that we presented at the open house back at the end of April. We are just going to be giving a lot of contextual information to council in June at that study session that will help them prepare for consideration and deliberation on an approval decision on that in the fall, when we bring the full community environmental assessment process, the CEAP, to you all, and then to council in the fall. So in between, trying to paint this kind of timeline for you verbally here. So in between our visit to council at the study session in June and that decision that happens in the fall, we will be hosting an open house with the public. Right now it's tentatively slated for late July. And at that open house, we will be bringing our staff recommended alternative along with more contextual information from the CEAP, or that full evaluation of the effort. And that will be a moment where we can get feedback from the community before we go to you all at TAB and then council for the decision.
Okay. Thank you for that context. That's helpful. I think as I interpreted this, we've been invited at the moment to sort of weigh in if you have, as members of TAB, a leaning and inclination, any insight on your both your preferred alternatives or what's important to you in weighing those alternatives, and also any perspective that you have given our individual communications with members of the public, and how that might have affected your views of the various alternatives. I would be very interested to hear them at the moment. And I would trust Valerie to sort of convey, or city staff to convey the gist of the conversation to council at their June 27 study session. Darcy, your hand is up.
Yeah, so just based on the letters that we've received and that I've received and other information that's been kind of forwarded to me, I'm curious about whether the city is open to anything beyond the 4 alternatives that have been put forth so far, because we're hearing a lot about the other options that might make sense in this context. So I'm curious about how flexible the city is with opportunities to add on to the alternatives that have already been proposed.
Darcy, what do you mean by other, like alternative, like what
do you want
other
me to be
options?
specific about?
Yeah, what other options are you thinking might be possible? See, we both have dancing boys in the background, no problem. It's dancing boy time.
Yeah, I know it's getting late. It's like time to go and parent.
I'm
All right.
sorry. Take you longer than I thought.
Okay, I'm gonna try to express my view here. Okay, right. So just based on feedback from residents, so there's A, B, C, and D, right? And people seem to be interested in an E alternative that doesn't involve, that basically involves focusing on options that would redirect bicyclists and pedestrians away from Iris instead of accommodating them on Iris, because of the volume of traffic and because of the importance of Iris as a corridor between Highway 119 and downtown Boulder. So this is, I know that you all have heard this idea, and I just wanted to kind of do the due diligence of putting these voices forward and just asking if there's any opportunity for that.
Is that question directed to your fellow board members or to city staff?
To city staff.
Okay. Well, I think, what I can share tonight is that we'll be bringing a lot of information to this council study session that I think will help offer, context for your question. I think in short, what the impetus of this project was to take a look at our arterials where we have our high risk network, our intersection of the CAN with our Vision Zero high risk network. Take a look at the types of design elements that could address the most common types of crashes. And so we then look to our city plans and policies that are already on the books to help us shape a range of possible alternatives to look at. We did look at a full range of ideas and possibilities, and eventually narrowed it down for the sake of feasibility and implementability to the 4 that were presented at the last open house. And so that's what I think we will be offering a lot more information about at the study session to help answer your question, Darcy. But those are some of the things that we consider as we started the project development process for this corridor.
Right, that's great. And I think maybe there's it's important now as you're, going forward with more information to the public to really contextualize all that and make sure that everyone understands fully why these 4 alternatives were developed and what the advantages are. I mean, I know that you've done that, right? And you've done a great job. And there's just a lot of concern for the residents around Iris, as I'm sure you're aware. So thank you.
I would add that to me, the four options make a lot of sense because any road, as I've said, that is not a limited access highway should be safe for people to bike on and people to walk on. And there's been concern about this reducing traffic throughput if you go from 4 lanes to 3 with a center turn lane. It's not clear to me that that's going to be a big problem because most of the current congestion is caused by people trying to turn in the fast lane and go fast in the turn lane. And you know, asking cyclists to take other streets, Calmia, Hawthorne, those are not adequate routes to replace Iris, I don't think. But I do understand neighbors having concerns about cut through traffic, particularly on the west side. That seems to be happening, and I would hope the city might be able to address speed mitigation on Calmia, for example, or perhaps trying to prevent cars from cutting through by making it impossible somehow or something.
I'm going to give other tab members an opportunity to speak. Jen?
I have a question. I'm not very well versed in the Irish situation, but I know I keep getting those emails from Judy Knock, and I thought, who is responding to her? What are we supposed to say? I don't want to just ignore her.
Yes.
But I understand she kind of is like repeating.
Yeah,
So
no,
I'm
it's a
like,
fine question. It is something that comes up because we don't really have, you know, a very regimented system for responding to public comment. I did respond to her today.
Okay.
Because she emailed me this morning. I think she probably emailed us individually is what it looked like. And so I responded
Yeah.
to her and thanked her. But yeah, you know, it's a hard thing to know how to do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong, Jen, in just sort of acknowledging their email, even if you have nothing in particular to say in response, just to say, I hear you, I've read you. And I know that that can go a long way. Occasionally someone will raise something or maybe we'll have 4 or 5 emails sent to staff that all kind of, you know, resonate in the same way. And often there will be a very sort of thorough response from a member of staff that, you know, we're just not that regimented. And so I've always encouraged tab members, feel free to respond individually. And typically we say, you know, I'm, you know, your email struck a chord with me, or I just wanted to get back to you. You might hear back from somebody else. I'm not speaking on behalf of Tab, but I just want to say I saw your email. And I do want to, I mean, I don't see any members of the public. There were several here earlier this evening. And we do see them, we do read them, we do, you know, think about them and register them. And so, and in particular, I think you're hitting on something, Jen, where a member of the public feels like they need to repeatedly bug us. And so it's worth, you know, sort of saying, I got you. I recognize your name, you know, Howard Fisher, who was on tonight and stayed on for quite a while. I know you, I got you, and I'm not ignoring you. But it's not anything that we have a hard protocol on. And mostly I appreciate that because I don't want it to feel mechanical or, you know, form lettery. So.
And just to reiterate, when we can reply to individual members with it, but because of open records law, we're not supposed to copy
other people, other
members of this board.
Right. I think we can copy them. We just can't have any back and forth about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's fine to BCC them, for instance, just so other people know that you've done it. And I didn't BCC the rest of you today on my response because I wasn't aware she had reached out to both of you, so all of you, because it looked like it just came to me. So, Trini, yes.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm highly supportive of the project and I think that there's a lot of confusion as to what the consequences might be. And I think that there's a need for education regarding what the consequences may be, or the apparent, consequences. I mean, I don't think that one of the things that I've heard the most be talked about is how that's one of the roads that is used to get
For
out.
evacuation, yes.
Yeah. And that should not be a concern, quite frankly. I mean, I think that it's just the anxiety is being placed in the wrong place. So
yeah, and I guess that's my first reaction to what you said at the beginning. Like there should be more education. In my dealings with with members of the public on a variety of road changes. Change is hard. People don't have very good confidence that change is going to be a positive thing. And honestly, in many of the situations, facts they're not as powerful as you would think. I think some contextualizing is helpful. And so, for instance, if you live near, I don't know, Kalmia and 16th, you have, let's say, 15 different options to get further east. And most of those are small roads. And if Iris is sort of the default now because it is the biggest, but that doesn't mean the other ones are inadequate, I guess. And it's always a difficult exercise to overcome people's sort of gut reaction and sort of common sense response to changes. And I came across this a whole lot working on protected bike lanes in New York City, because it just made perfect intuitive sense that if you take away a motor vehicle lane, everything's going to go terribly. And now that we've got 10, 12, 15 years of data under our belts, actually traffic is flowing more smoothly there. It's more predictable. There's less stop and start. I think Iris would probably have some of that similar thing. And just to say, like, I think there should be more education. If anything, if city staff is guilty of anything, it's putting too much information out there. The website on this project is it's great for people like me who really like to dig into the data and really want to know everything about all of it. But I think that that might be a role that we play, is sort of simplifying it and sort of, and I know there's another round of information the city's going to put out that kind of is issue by issue, sort of, that will clarify some of these things now that we've heard and are able to distill some big ideas and big areas of concern for members of the public. There are more targeted responses and analysis and just sort of reassurances about what we expect to have happen. And again, as members of TAB, I would really try to help advance that messaging, because many people who are concerned about any of these options, it boils down to 3 or 4, what if scenarios. And the scenarios are, they're not make-believe, but they are modelable and they are analogizable generally to other areas of the city and other places with similar volumes, similar demands, similar peak hour things. And I think that we will be able to reassure them that the sky will not fall. Yes, Mike.
I would add, I've also had interactions with neighbors who are very much in support of, in particular, option A. One woman, Natalie Orphan, who lives there, and she
lives on Iris. She's one of the few that is on Iris.
She's written letters, and I've chatted with her online, and she has a lot of concerns even about, option B with the two-way cycling, causing safety issues, and she bikes on Iris and all sorts of weather, and So I've talked with her a lot, and I tend to agree with her that option A seems like the best one.
Mhm.
But certainly for me, option B is a second choice.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Natalie recently about these options. I haven't talked to her at all about these options since they've been unveiled. But what I understood from reading her email, I lived near Folsom. I was living on Folsom and Mapleton when Folsom Avenue changed from 4 lanes to 3. And the ease of crossing that as a cyclist was tenfold. Even though, instead of having to deal with only moving lanes and keeping track of 2 sets this way and 2 sets this way, to have that HALVE, have that crossing like exposure was enormous. And then to have the availability of the center turning lane in case I messed up and misjudged something as, a quasi safe haven. I mean, you're still exposed, you're in the middle of the road, but you're not in a lane of like actively moving traffic. Just having those 2 changes as a cyclist trying to cross from one side to the other made things far easier, far easier. And it's today, it's physically protected. It's performing well. There were growing pains, and I'm not going to say that there aren't going to be growing pains on Iris. To my mind, as prior city councils and this city council have continued to identify our arterials, specifically Iris, as trouble spots that need real attention and immediate attention. And by immediate, I mean, we identified it during the Living Labs, which is something Darcy described earlier, the Living Labs period in 2015, 2016, as something that needed remediation. And here we are 8 years later, and it's still operating the same way, and it is still not serving all users. And to me, that's what this comes down to. We as a community have repeatedly doubled down on the idea that all of our streets, unless they're limited access highways, unless it's foothills or US 36, all of our streets need to accommodate and facilitate users of all ages and abilities in all modes. It does not matter to me that there are better, more comfortable cycling routes off of Iris. That is absolutely true. What matters to me is that there is no comfortable cycling route on Iris. There is nowhere that a sane parent would put an 8-year-old on Iris Avenue. And we have, as a city, I'm not saying as TAP, I'm saying as a community, in 2 different transportation master plans, in all kinds of like sort of temperature taking efforts, including this massive, to my mind, unnecessary, massive effort around Iris in particular right now about what people want to see and how people expect Iris to operate. The vast majority of the city says, yes, we want this to be a usable street and not a highway separating the neighborhood to the north and the neighborhood to the south. Life would be better if this street didn't operate that way. And if we don't adopt options A or B, we are kicking the can about 20 years down the road and about $35 million extra dollars. And you just heard tonight, our CIP plan is shrinking. This is going to be a CIP project. It's unconscionable to let this go on any further the way it has when we have, as a city and as a community, repeatedly said we need to address Iris. And so I prefer option A. I will accept option B. I think options C and D would be a massive mistake and a dereliction of our responsibility as city planner, city staff, city council, to the scores of people who have been told TOLLED, who have been asked for their opinion and their input and have told us repeatedly, TOLD, repeatedly, they want something different and better that accommodates everyone in Iris. Trini.
I just want to add to that, that Iris is part of CAN, and CAN
Yes.
has been approved. So
yes,
that should be the end of it.
I agree. I
No
agree.
further
Trini, do you have a preference, A, B, C, D?
I'm like you, A and B.
A
Yeah.
and B. Between those two? A. Yeah. Darcy.
I would also vote for A.
Yeah. B, C, D? Any input on B or C or D? Darcy, you're in for A and nothing.
Well, I mean, it was interesting at the April open house talking with staff about the various alternatives and what merits they saw to them. And I think I'm sorry, I can't form a coherent thought about it at the moment. I need to review them more closely. But I mean, D kind of came up a little bit in terms of, preserving the most roadway space. But I personally, I think A is the best option. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Jen, do you have any input on this? No. Okay. Valerie, is that helpful?
Yes, thank you for having this conversation. And just a point of clarification is, in June, when we go to council, we're not looking for a decision on the preferred alternative. It's really to explore, all of the information that we've been analyzing to date, whether it's technical or the input from community engagement, and explore that with council. So they then have time to think about that, digest all of that before the decision is brought to them in the fall.
Right.
And so on that journey, of course, you all will be invited to attend the open house in July. And that will be an opportunity to learn a lot more as well as we continue our analysis, we continue our project development process, which means the design process, both the technical and integrating our community engagement feedback. So I would just say that, there's a lot more to come in this process, and we go through this process in order to make sure there's no stone uncovered. And so I think, I'm excited that we will be able to bring a lot more information to you tentatively in September to this board, where you will be asked to make a recommendation to council. And, that I think will be a time where you can explore in more detail, some of the considerations, the trade-offs, the benefits around the different options. So, not to discourage you from starting to think ahead on these things, but just wanting to explain that there is a process we're going through, and there will be a lot more contextual information for you all to consider in the months ahead.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful, Valerie. Do you know when exactly the open house will be in July yet?
It's slated tentatively for late July, and we will, be publishing that soon. If it's not already on our website, I think it takes some time and effort to secure those venues.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Valerie, for what it's worth, when I've been kind of doing some man on the street talking to people about Iris, one of the most useful ways to distill it has been basically saying Iris Avenue is going to change. And there's 4 options staff has identified, and all of them have a protected bike lane. And so really the difference between A, B, C, and D is what do you do? Genetic, what is it? I should know what this is. The box. Big A, big B, little b, and big A is should the bike lanes be on either side of the road. Little A is should they be collapsed on, as a 2-way cycle track on the north side of the street. Big B is should it happen really soon, and little b is should it effectively turn into a road widening project. which is going to be 20 years and an extra $35 million ish in then dollars, maybe. And so those are like the two variables. And when I put it that way, people are like, oh yeah, no, we should do one of the soon ones. We like A and B just absolutely come to the top when I put it that way. And there's a difference of opinion, in fact, in this household, about whether A is B or A is better or B is better, option A or option B is better. But just factoring in sort of the extra time and expense of C&D and realizing that it means a widening of the roadway is where the conversation ends. And so I would just kind of offer that, because I think the city's messaging about what C&D entail has not been very clear about that. And I think when people realize we're like talking about expanding a highway in this neighborhood, that is a real point of clarification and calcifies people's thinking about it.
That's a really good point, Tila.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and that's great feedback. I appreciate that. You know, staff are hard at work finalizing some information materials that will be released soon. And, you know, Tila, I think you mentioned that earlier, but it is, you know, something that our staff have been working really hard on. It's not in the form of in the recessive genes and dominant genes, I think is what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But I think it will distill the information we're putting out will distill some of these key considerations and offer a bit more context than what we were really able to offer at the last open house. So I just want to plug that, and also thank staff for all of their work to take what is really a very complex technical project and continue diligently on our analysis, the technical stuff that's going on the back end, and also really continue to have robust community conversations, you know, meeting folks in the neighborhood, hearing their perspectives. That is really important for the integrity of our process and for the ultimate design outcome that we have, that we bring that fidelity from those conversations into our technical process as well. So I think you will all be very pleased with some of the information that will be very soon available. But this is great confirmation from you all as our board that would be helpful. And so we look forward to you know, sharing that with you all, and of course, hearing any feedback that you have as we prepare for our visit to council.
Great, thank you. It's called a Punnett Square. Punnett Square. Okay, terrific. Thank you. Next matters from the board. I did not, Meredith, as I had said I was intending to do, I've been frazzled. I did not go back and listen to confirm our TAB representation on the Vision Zero Community Partnership. Trini, are you still on here?
Yes.
Yes.
That will be me.
So you're the primary for Vision Zero Community Partnership, and then Meredith had me as alternate, but I have a feeling it wasn't me as alternate. Was it Darcy as alternate? I'm happy to be alternate, but I have a feeling like I got relieved of duty on that one. Darcy, do you recall?
I think it was Darcy.
I think it was Darcy too.
Yeah, I remember
Okay.
that.
Okay, so let's confirm that, Meredith. Willerton primary, Darcy alternate. Sorry, Kitching alternate.
And it's a good thing this is on there.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you. Open board comment. Does anyone have anything else to rant about tonight? Jen, you're
I feel like I'm not getting all our emails. Like I don't have agendas, don't get slides. So I'm like, what's going on?
That's a fine question. You should be getting an email with the slide presentations. The packets are no longer getting emailed directly to us, and so you have to go to the city website link. And Meredith has been sending a link to the spot on the website that's like the tab meeting, and you have to scroll down, and load the meeting materials. And then it sends you to like the city's filing system. And for reasons unknown to me, it's oldest to youngest. Or, no, yeah, so most recent stuff is at the bottom, and I have many thoughts about that. So you have to scroll down to the bottom. It's a process. I'm
Also,
telling-
I noticed some important emails are in my junk folder on my
Oh,
tab
yes.
email.
Okay.
so-
That does happen sometimes.
Yeah, I was also wondering,
I misjudged.
on the actual Boulder County website for boards and commissions, tab is not listed. And I'm like, why is tab the only one not listed?
Jim, I'll set up an appointment with you and we can screen share and walk through. I'm
Okay,
sorry that I
thank you.
haven't done that before.
Thank you, Meredith. That's delightful. Thank you for doing that. Anything else? Open board comment? Great. Future agenda topics. I don't have any burning ideas. You've heard tonight about a couple of items that'll be coming to us later this summer. Thank you again to staff for giving us the first bit of what happened at the state level, because there was just a flurry of activity, and I'm very appreciative that you were able to give us that just kind of breakdown of what happened, even if we don't really know yet what that means for the city council. But any other requests or thoughts about what we should be looking at into the future for agenda setting? It might not happen this next meeting, but if you do, I believe my agenda setting meeting is, gosh, I'm bad at this, next Tuesday.
Since we'll be not having a meeting in July, it's your summer break.
Yay!
We may just kind of push out that agenda setting meeting for the August meeting.
Okay, so there's no meeting on July 8th.
There's no meeting in July. No.
And having known that, can I just extend an invitation to everybody here?
For the August ride.
Yeah,
Well done.
yeah.
Yes.
So August 11th, we're co-organizing the Ride for Your Life Ride for Magnus. It's a ride that's completely free. It's an advocacy ride. We have confirmed, well, I can't really say, but we have several people confirmed as speakers, and it will be a phenomenal event. We're looking to have 4,000 riders. So we would love, and it's also going to be a walk and a run. So we're just, it's a very sad thing, but it's also, I think it'll help the community in many ways. And we're just very grateful for all the support that I've had so far from the city and from the county and from CDOT and everybody. And yeah, so hopefully you guys can make it. It will start at 9:30 and the ceremony will be at 12:30. And it starts from the 360 parking lot, which is where the Buff Classic leaves from. We will ride to Magnus's bike and then come back, and it'll end at Fair and Field. So
thank you.
Please send us an email.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah.
And
thank you.
And, you said, so there's no meeting in July at all? Okay.
Unless you want to call one.
Sorry. I didn't mean to express shock, but yeah.
I
it's all
thought so, Mike.
What's that?
I'll cancel that meeting as well. It's canceled on the website, but I didn't
okay.
rescind it on your calendars.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I will happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
I second.
I move.
Yeah.
Mike
to move first.
Trini seconds. We'll get it someday. All right, we are adjourned until August.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Great
All right,
meeting.
thank you so much.
Good
night.
Good night.
Good night.